Hey everybody, we're getting started in just a minute here. Welcome to the stream. I'm running a little behind. Welcome everybody to the stream. We are going to be doing a X space here. I'm going to be getting interviewed on this X space. Should be sweet. So join that if you want to listen in. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up real quick. Actually, once I get started here. Okay. Wow. Hey everybody, how are you guys doing tonight? He's so Jonathan Caruso is going to be interviewing me here. We're going to be talking about, I don't even remember. He gave me a whole list of things, but we're winging it, guys. I'm excited to talk about stuff. I'm excited to be honest and give you guys my insights and what have you tonight. I've been talking a lot with people behind the scenes. It's been really interesting. It's been fun. I'm excited for this. Thanks everybody for being here. Okay, hold on.
Jonathan Caruso show. I'm joined, as always, by my beautiful co-host, Miss S. Also, my alt account.
You guys can hear me, right?
Some of it's explained.
We're broadcasting on YouTube.
And a very special guest tonight, Mr. Ashton Forbes. We're here to talk about MH370, free energy, and life in general. Mr. Forbes, thank you for this interview and welcome. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, Jonathan, man, doing great. I just got back from dinner, had some Indian food. It was delicious. And I know we've already got a bunch of people in the chat here. Like one of the things that I'm most proud of is fostering this MH370X community. We've got some of the smartest people involved in this community, people that have been on, that know a lot about kind of the history of the technology and the suppression around it that we've been digging into. And I couldn't be here at this point without all of those people. So thank you guys very much from the bottom of my heart.
And you've got a Discord community as well, is that right?
Yeah. So early on, probably like a week in to this whole MH370 investigation, I thought, this deserves its own like hashtag and community, because it really wasn't just about MH370. It was about like, well, how does this technology work behind the scenes? And there's like this kind of conglomeration of the two aspects. So I started this community. I just thought, well, I'm just going to put an X at the end of it. To tell you guys a quick funny story is like when I saw the UFO X thing, I thought that the X meant like, because that's like UFO Twitter and then there's UFO X. I thought the X meant like technology. It actually just meant like X is in the platform X. So when I added the X to it, I just thought, oh, it's like technology plus MH370. And it just sounded cool. And then I started a Discord pretty quickly. Had somebody help set it up for me. I didn't know how to even set up server Discords or anything like that. But it's pretty self-sufficient. I think we're built up to almost over 700 people or something like that. It's pretty big. And yeah, it's been a wild ride. A lot of people, I can't even really keep up with the Discord anymore because there's so many people in it. But there's people like I've been in a lot of communities that are like really toxic, for lack of a better term. And this community is really the opposite of it. Like rarely are there even arguments amongst people. And, not everybody has the same views. Not everybody has the same political views or the same view on the history of the UFO phenomenon and the nature of it. So I just think it's really cool that everybody can kind of get along and not really, get at each other's throats. So that's what I love about this community. I love about our Discord.
That's awesome. And we've got some people, at least one person asking for a link to the Discord. So if you want to drop an invite, if it is open invitation, or how can people join it?
Yeah, it's funny because I was talking to the live stream. I'm live right now on X and on YouTube right now. We're live streaming this simultaneously. I pretty much always post a link every day when I stream. So for people that don't know, the best way to catch an invite is to join the live stream. This is how I kind of keep it so it's got a gradual growth. We've had a lot of trolls that would kind of jump in, so that's why I don't have permanent invites out there. So I did just post one right now in the YouTube channel, so you can either check YouTube or X. It's on the screen on X right now. And if you're not familiar with these servers, like most of them have a verification process. We have a channel called Verify. Go there, press the button or whatever it makes you do. And then you wait like 10 minutes and then you have access to everything. So there you go.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And before we do start, I want to have just a moment of silence for the 239 souls that were lost on Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. Thank you. Ashton, how did you originally get involved with this? I know the videos were put out by the Regicide Anon account on YouTube back in, what was it, May 2014. And I know there's been some talk, like in the description, it says that they were obtained on March, which, that date could have been, you know, just written in there. There's no way to prove that that was the date that Regicide and on that account ascertain those videos. But how did you come into this investigation?
Yeah, great question. And the history of it is that this investigation started on social media. It started on Reddit. I'm not a big fan of Reddit. In fact, I think that Reddit is the number one most federal controlled social media that's currently out there right now. And I think it's the biggest platform of disinformation on the planet currently. I think that people used to think that stuff like 4chan was, and now I think it's places like Reddit, unfortunately. And what you'll find there, especially if you're in the UFO community, is that there's a huge amount of suppression that happens. There's been like at least 3 or 4 cases in the last year where people have had their posts like deleted that were like whistleblowers that were posting there. One person in real time, I think it was the EBO scientist, was literally answering questions and got their account deleted while they were answering questions, which is just crazy to me. But these videos they've been posted every so often. I didn't go look and see all the times they've been posted on the internet, but I remember the most recent case we looked up was in January of 2023, that the MH370 videos have been posted on the UFOs subreddit. And I remember looking back right when they reemerged in August. They were posted again on like August 7th. And that's when things just started to take off. But people looked back and they found that January post. And it was actually by Ashley Berlitz, or at least the YouTube video that was posted was by Ashley Berlitz. And it was like all these negative comments about how offensive it is to the families that people are posting this, blah, blah, blah. Really weird comments like that. But when it reemerged in August, people right away were doing analysis, and they were already finding stuff that made the video seem extremely authentic. For me, the biggest one, and my social media, guys, just be honest, like I didn't have a Reddit account back then. I was just one of those people that was like lurking or whatever. I had one before, but I deleted it around 2020. And my my Twitter account, or X account, just had like 30 followers on it. I had it since 2014, but I had never really like used it very much. I replied a little bit, but never like posted anything. And when I saw that, like, if you guys go look back, you'll find all the analysis threads from early August that were out there. But for me, the moment that I was convinced was a couple days in, where somebody had pointed out that this was a Citrix session. That was a remote terminal Citrix session. For people that are not familiar, that means that you're logged into a remote database. And a lot of times this is how big companies operate. All the companies I've ever worked with, like whenever I log into the domains, and I'm in healthcare IT, you usually are logging into a remote server. And when I saw that, and that explained the mouse on the screen and the frame rate difference between the mouse and the satellite video in the background, and between that and then having seen the drone video 10 years ago and just dismissing it like everybody else had, in combination with the fact that myself, when I was looking at the videos, one of the things that I noticed right away, like I was trying to think about like how these videos were filmed, and I realized it had to be a screen recording, that this wasn't somebody with like a phone. A lot of these like leaked videos, it's like somebody's got their phone and they're recording a screen, a computer screen. And that's for safety purposes so that they can't be tracked as easily. Because when you're doing a remote terminal session, like that's going to be logged for sure. So when I saw that, I went, holy crap, like that's weird. This means that somebody actually did a screen recording. It's a Citrix session. They're going to get caught. And that's for me when I was like, I was at that point had high suspicion that what we were looking at here was really authentic military leaked footage. It didn't make any sense for anybody even to hoax something like that, or how they would even think to hoax it, especially when a lot of the people in the public don't even understand what a Citrix session is. what a remote terminal session is. So the body of knowledge somebody would have to have, it was huge. And then, of course, lastly, the biggest thing was just what is satellite video in general? Nobody even knew. Like most people that looked at that satellite video, the first thing they thought is like, am I looking up or am I looking down? They didn't even know. A lot of people now, you say you're looking down, they're like, oh, that's water. Wait, what? Because we have no frame of reference for what we're even looking at there. And I thought, well, that's interesting because maybe we do have some crazy satellite technology that nobody knows about. So I started posting about it. I started amplifying a lot of the analysis that I saw because I had a feeling it was going to get suppressed. I had seen LK99 get suppressed in real time when people were looking into this metamaterial substance. And I had already like suspected Reddit of potentially being Fed controlled. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. There ended up being these little wars where debunkers were trying to convince people that the videos were fake and for them to go away. And then people were doing more and more analysis that proved all these small details were legit. And then eventually this Pyromania debunk appeared from a 1-day-old Reddit account. And when I saw the 1-day-old Reddit account, I knew that this was some shenanigans going on right away. And they claimed that this non-matching VFX was a match to the videos, which objectively is not. Even now, at this point, the debunkers, their argument is that somebody modified it to get it to match the videos, even though it's not the right number of frames. It's not even the right frame rate in terms of the speed of it. It's just a similar blast effect. Now, what ended up happening after that is people dug into like where that asset came from. They found that the asset came from the DOE, DOD. It was like a contractor to them as the person that made it, and that there was like updates on it recently as well, and that where the place had been downloaded from came from like January of 2023. They found a lot of sketchy stuff. But the UFOs subreddit moderators just banned all discussion from that point going forward. And you would see all these comments about, thank God this is going away. Thank God we don't have to talk about this anymore and stuff like that, which was just I'm not saying that all these people are disinformation. In fact, we can talk more about that later. I think that very few people in the UFO community are government disinformation. But I just knew there was more to this case. So that's when I started picking up the reins myself, started my own investigation. We're 9 months later, and I think that I'm up there in the upper echelons of MH370 investigators. I would put my knowledge up there with anybody else in terms of experts on the case and investigation. And now, as you guys have seen in the last few days, the science has led to this idea that there's an ether, and that if there's an ether that you can produce what we would call free energy, which is really over unity. And I found a backdoor way to prove the videos are real, which is if we can prove that you can actually achieve over unity with a device that can run freely, basically persistently, a perpetual motion machine, as people would call it, then in my mind, that's a backdoor proof to the technology and the videos being real, because we never would have gotten to this point without that. So sorry, that was a little long-winded, but there you go.
No, that's okay. What do you think anyone would have to gain from hoaxing the videos? Like what do you think? Let's just assume for a moment that the video showing the 3 orbs coming in and circling the plane and teleporting it away. Let's say someone faked those and put it out. What purpose do you think that would serve?
Yeah, that's the big problem. There's none. Like what's the psychological profile for the hoaxer? There's none. And what this all comes down to is that when people ask me like, or what kind of investigation I'm running, or they say, well, why don't you write a scientific paper? A lot of people say that. And I just kind of laugh and I go, I'm not out here trying to conduct a scientific experiment, although I do follow the scientific method because I think that that's a good way to determine the truth. I'm doing more aligned to a criminal investigation. And what I say by that is that it's not that every piece of evidence has to be like a hard smoking gun. It's a matter of putting all the evidence out there and then coming up with a comprehensive story that makes sense. This is how a criminal case is fought in the court system. And so you take all this evidence and you go, okay, what's the story that fits all of the evidence? Keeping in mind that some evidence is stronger than other evidence. And we do have some smoking guns as well, like the satellite coordinates. And I think somebody else made a post recently saying, well, with respect to the story for them being fake, there's nothing that makes any sense. Like this idea that somebody's some kind of monster that's tracking the case better than the public was tracking it, that has insight to military knowledge and classified assets where there was never even any drone videos declassified until 2017. And then knowing more about physics, alternative physics that really nobody in the mainstream knew about. And knowing also about like the engineering capabilities of a real Boeing 777, because that's a real Boeing 777 we're seeing with a real turning capabilities. There's just no story that makes any sense, even if you don't even disregard the timeline. What you said, the first registry on satellite video says received March 12th, 2014 on it. That's 4 days after the plane disappeared. And so the first thing as a debunker is you'd have to say, well, regicide must be in on the hoax, because otherwise, why would they lie about received March 12th, 2014? And that's only a 4-day window. I mean, we weren't even searching. We were searching the South China Sea still then. It wasn't until March 13th that they came up with this South Indian Ocean narrative, and it was U.S. intelligence sources that came up with it. So there's really no comprehensive story that makes any sense. And to date, even 9 months later, no debunker has ever put forth any type of comprehensive story that makes any sense. No debunker has ever tried to find the hoaxer. There is no hoaxer. They don't exist. They didn't come forward for $150,000 real money by real rich people. And I think that's very telling, especially because the debunkers claim that they found a cloud picture that could have only been downloaded less than a handful number of times. And they literally know who the owner of the website is. So there's no excuse not to find that person, versus the story that I've put forth, which I think uses, no, I don't think, I know it uses more evidence than any of the official expert investigators' stories by far. It's not even close, actually. And that's the thing where I think a lot of people struggle with, is that they don't realize, they say, oh, well, you don't have any evidence. Not only do we have evidence, we have more evidence than every single other story out there by magnitudes. And that's why I'm very confident that the United States took that plane and those videos are legitimate.
Do you think there's a non-zero chance that it could be a very elaborate? You mentioned that you would have to have knowledge of the Boeing 777. You would have to have knowledge of the available satellite footage, and be able to knowledge of the Citrix systems. Do you think that it's possible that it is a very elaborate counterintelligence operation in order to misdirect or cover up something else, maybe more nefarious?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, what I would say is that the only thing that's even plausible is the idea that the United States government made those videos themselves, which also just makes no sense either, unfortunately. Is like, what were they trying to convince people, that aliens took the plane? Like, what's more nefarious than covering up gravity manipulation, space-time manipulation, and making it look like they took the plane? Like, if you show those videos without any of this investigation to random people on the street, and you say these are real videos, they're going to say, okay, wait, so the United States stole this plane? Because no one's going to believe that aliens took it. At least not, people in the UFO community might, but people on the street certainly aren't. So the question then is like, well, you're just implicating yourself if you're the United States government and you made those videos, and they've never promoted them. If anything, they're still trying to hide them right now. I've given this information to AARO, and they're not coming out saying, yeah, guys, we hoaxed those videos, ha ha ha, or even like trying to promote them or anything like that out there. So I don't really see any narrative that makes sense. Plus, the biggest issue that is against the videos being fake entirely, no matter what your scenario is, if it's a hoaxer or the government made them, is that we never found the plane. There's no plane. They claim that they know the plane crashed in the South Indian Ocean based on some satellite pings. And they claim they know it must have been along the 7th arc based on these pings. The 7th ping actually comes like 10 minutes after the 6th ping, I think. And that's how they determine that must be like when it crashed. And they have the plane running out of fuel. There is nowhere else for this plane to be. The only logical conclusion is the satellite pings are wrong. We searched up, down. The official search, not only did they not find a plane, the official search found literally nothing. Nothing. Not any black boxes, not one piece of the plane. That's just impossible. I mean, the thing I joke about with people is that you don't have to be any kind of expert to solve the case of MH370. You just have to be able to use basic critical thinking capabilities. Not even a complicated critical thinking, just basic critical thinking. Planes don't crash in the South Indian Ocean without leaving a debris field. They clearly sent people to the South Indian Ocean because it's the middle of nowhere. And the plane can't be somewhere else because we've got satellite pings that say where the plane should be. And we've got the plane running out of fuel in this scenario as well. It can't fly without fuel. So where exactly is the plane? And you go look at those videos and you go, oh, okay, well, this explains why they covered up the real story. This explains where the plane is. It's not where they think it is, somewhere completely different. And I think that that's where, again, people just have to look at the evidence in totality and try to come up with a scenario that makes sense. And what you'll find out is that the fire scenario, the emergency event scenario, by far makes more sense than anybody else's. And at least, let's say, it makes more sense than this plane randomly flying into the South Indian Ocean for 6 hours and then somehow not leaving a debris field out there.
Let's shift gears just a little bit. I'm curious, are you familiar with Colonel Carl Nell's comments at the recent SALT conference?
Is that the one where he said that extraterrestrials exist or something like that?
That's it. I'm gonna play the clip for people real quick. It's very short.
And so, Carl, here's the $1 million question. Do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
And so, Carl, that is quite a bold statement. I'm wondering, and I'm curious, how confident are you that that is true?
There's zero doubt.
So Colonel Carl Nell has worked, he's an aerospace executive. He's worked at the Pentagon, Bell Telephone Laboratories, Lockheed Martin, TASC, CACI, INSCO. He's done a lot. He's not just some fly-by-night military officer that they pulled out and stuck on stage. There's also been several other whistleblowers. David Grush testified before Congress that there's a UAP retrieval program. And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts? You said that if you took these videos out on the street and showed people and said that it was aliens, that they wouldn't believe it. But what we've seen, at least in the UFO community, is this really big push for controlled disclosure, that there is NHI, non-human intelligence, aliens, so to speak. So what are your thoughts on disclosure that's coming from the government, people like Colonel Nell?
Yeah, I mean, what I would challenge people is, so what if aliens exist? The universe is extremely big, and it's now, we just pushed it back another 10 billion years. We were used to say it was 13.7 billion years old, and we're really also talking about distance in terms of light years as well. And then now we're saying it's 26 billion. I mean, that's a really, 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 really big universe. To me, I believe that life is abundant and life is probably everywhere. Now, when it comes to advanced life, I think that's a different story. But if the technology we see in those videos is real, then all the cards are on the table. The more I learn about the technology, the less sure I am about the nature of where it comes from and the nature of the non-human intelligence question. So I have no reason to doubt people like Carl Nell. It wouldn't surprise me if there is some non-human intelligence. The only question to me would be, what's the nature of it? I think that everything's on the table. It could be aliens from somewhere else, aliens from another dimension. It could be future humans and there's some retro causality thing going on. It could be cryptids or ultra terrestrials. It could be that we are the aliens and we're living in a prison planet. I really don't know. But at the end of the day, I don't really care that much, to be honest with you. None of those things would really surprise me at this point. I mean, the fact that we've been covering up gravity and space-time manipulation technology probably for decades is really damn dark. And it makes me question, how dark the government goes with hiding and suppressing some of this and why they've been hiding and suppressing some of this. If it's just as simple as, well, we're going to destroy ourselves, or if it gets a lot darker where it's like, we're the aliens and we're living in a prison planet. If we get too technologically advanced, our big brothers are going to come in and slap us down or something like that. I really don't know, but I'm excited to look into those answers in the future and try to figure that out. What I would say, though, and this is a little bit as a tangential point, is that a lot of people think that the UFO community is infiltrated by disinformation agents who are, spreading a bunch of lies, and everybody thinks that everybody else is a scammer and what have you. And I see all this infighting. I never expected it when I first jumped into this community and was trying to disclose the MH370 videos. But now I see everything a lot clearer. And what I would say is there's far fewer, if any, disinformation agents. The community doesn't need disinformation agents to be dysfunctional. The UFO community in general is just at each other's throats all the time. Everybody's talking smack about everybody else. Everybody's spreading lies about everybody else. That's the reason why all this stuff gets ground to a halt. And that's the reason why, when Carl Nell says something like that, it's like, oh, people will say he's just telling stories or what have you. But then you'll say, like, he's got all this background. He'd be in a position to know. And you say, well, what's the way through that? How do you get past that impasse of cool story, bro, basically? And the answer is you go into look at the technology. You learn about the science. If you can prove the technology is real, everything else will just fall into place. And this is why I tell the UFO community, it's a little bit arrogant, but like I'm giving you guys disclosure on a silver platter. Because if we have gravity and space-time manipulation technology, I personally don't think that we've figured that all out by ourselves without some type of help. And I think people would stress, or it would, force people to ask a lot of questions about the idea of non-human intelligence. And I don't think they're ever going to wheel out any bodies to say, here's the bodies. And ironically, like if Biden came out and wheeled the bodies out, I think a lot of people would be like, no, now I know they're fake. So this is the struggle that we're in this post-truth world where it doesn't even matter. And as long as we're sitting here and talking about this person said that aliens are real, and this person says they had a telepathic communication with alien, what have you, we're never going to get disclosure. And I think that's what the government wants, because the more we're sitting here fighting about, I heard aliens are real and you need to trust me, and no, I'm not going to trust you, that's just a story, nothing's going to ever move forward. But if people are actually focused on trying to understand the science about how a ship could even get here from the Andromeda Galaxy, or how we can have hovering crafts, then I think that we will end up getting disclosure automatically as a byproduct.
What do you see as the best way to disclosure of all of this information? The gravity control suppression, the energy suppression, the existence of NHI. What is the best way forward for complete disclosure?
First of all, what I would say is everybody should do their own thing, and I don't want to discourage anybody from doing their own thing. And I know actually that there is anti-gravity type technology that's out there. It's incredible. And I would say that the secrets from what I've figured out is that comes down to semiconductors and plasma physics, which is, there you go. There's a little head start maybe for the people that want to dig into it and look into it. It's all hidden in plain sight as well, is that all the puzzle pieces are out there for people to understand. But with respect to getting it out there for disclosure, I think that really what we have to do is we have to wake people up. I went through my own awakening process. If you had asked me a year ago about pretty much anything that I was talking about right now, I probably wouldn't believe it myself. And I think that goes to show that everybody has to see the evidence for themselves and start to wake up. Is that the biggest thing is disbelief that holds people back. And for the record, on the non-human intelligence thing, it's quite divided. What I found is even amongst my own followers, significant percentage of them are certain aliens can't be real, and another percentage of them are experiencers who know aliens are real. So I think that is a very challenging thing to push past. Now, what I've chosen to do is I found a backdoor way to potentially showing that the MH370 videos are real, which is that when I looked into the science, I found, all these scientists that explain this technology also believe that there's an ether, that the space-time ether, that space-time is not empty. And if that's true, then we can also harness zero-point energy, free energy, over unity. These are all pretty much synonyms for the same concept. It's not that energy just becomes free. It just is that we can extract energy from the environment using an open system that gets more energy out than it puts into it. And you would say, oh, well, that's free energy, but you still need to be able to produce the devices. So that's the reason why I've been pushing for over unity and free energy, is that if we can prove that that's real, then deductively you can say, oh, well, that means this other science can now be real. That means that what we see in the MH370 videos can be real. And once people accept that that stuff is possible, here's the way that brainwashing and propaganda works. is that you need a critical mass of people to believe it. A lot of what propaganda is, especially on places like Reddit, is consensus cracking or building a false sense of consensus. If it seems like everybody else agrees with you, then you agree with it as well. People just read the headlines, they read the top comments. That's how they form their opinions. And you'll see this a lot. I've actually seen it in my own life where people literally adopt other people's beliefs and stories as their own, and then they become their own stories. So how do you break that? Well, you do the opposite. You wake people up. And once enough people accept that this technology can be real, it becomes self-evident, and then it just all starts spilling out. So that's what I've been trying to do is I pushed away from just like really trying to convince people and then just try to show people, here's the science that shows that quantum teleportation is out there. Here are the scientific papers and the scientists who are studying anti-gravity. Here's how they like disappeared or got sucked into the black projects, as opposed to just telling stories about, whoa, I saw this and I saw that. So that's my opinion on how it's going to get done. But ultimately, I wouldn't say I'm some expert on how to achieve disclosure. I'm just one guy who had his mind blown and now is trying to figure out what the best way is myself.
Thanks very much again for doing this interview. If you haven't already, folks, please like the space. It is free. If you feel so inclined, please repost it. If you have questions for Ashton, we are going to be bringing people up on stage later in the interview, or you can post them in the comment section. Make sure you're also following Ashton on YouTube, where he is live streaming this space right now. Hello, YouTube chat. Also, Ashton, I wanted to ask you about a comment that someone put from Hetlau. I'll share it up into the Jumbotron, aka the Nest. She said, MH370, while the search has been going on, more than 20 pieces of possible debris have been found by members of the public on the African coast and islands in the Indian Ocean. And she linked to a BBC article. So I'm just curious if you could give your thoughts on that. I'll share that up right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I've got a couple images that I probably should post as well. But I think that the two things that people say are, well, we've got these satellite pings where we found nothing. And that, oh, well, the ocean's really big. And I think I addressed the ocean's really big thing. I mean, if the satellite pings are real, then it doesn't matter how big the ocean is. If the satellite pings are fake, then we have to question the whole South Indian Ocean narrative to begin with, since the only evidence that the plane went into the South Indian Ocean is the satellite pings. Now, we know the United States government is lying about this plane. How do we know that? Well, there was 5 radars in range when supposedly Malaysian radar lost contact with the plane. 5 radars from 3 different countries. Thailand, India, and Indonesia all would have been tracking the plane. They've all been silent about it. That makes no sense. And that was all in the location where the plane supposedly turned into the South Indian Ocean. We also have the SOSA system, sound surveillance system, that heard the Titan sub pop. That would have pinpointed the exact location of the crash of the plane. And there was 2 hydrophones that they looked into scientifically, actually the beginning of May, about a month ago. And only one of them even picked up any sound that even anywhere near the times when this plane was in the South Indian Ocean out of the 2 of them. And both of them should have heard the plane crash into the ocean. And the one that heard it, the time is 20 minutes after the supposed plane would have run out of fuel. So you can pretty much rule out the only acoustic sound that they detected. So there's essentially no chance it could have even crashed down there. And there's at least 3 additional radars: Diego Garcia, Pine Gap, which are 2 military bases in the United States, and the JORN system, Jindley Operational Radar Network of Australia. Over the horizon, radar can see for thousands of miles, potentially could have tracked the plane from takeoff to crashing. So all these systems didn't see it, and no satellites saw anything either. We've shown, if those videos are real, that we have video satellite surveillance that we can pull up in hindsight and track objects after the fact. And that even if you don't believe that we're doing real-time tracking like that, or that we have those capabilities, the plane crashing into the ocean, we have satellites that are mapping the whole globe every day. The debris field would have been visible from space for days, and they saw nothing. Now you say, okay, well, what about the debris that we did find? Well, if you look at the 20 pieces of debris, and I think that it's arguable how many are from the plane. First of all, none of them were matched with a unique serial number. When the media talks about the serial number situation, they leave out the fact that it's just a part number, that the unique serial plate on the flaperon, which washed up in Reunion Island, was missing, mysteriously missing, even though it's bolted on. Now, I think that this story that I presented is the only story that actually assumes that all that debris is of MH370. The problem with the South Indian Ocean narrative is it's literally impossible for that debris to have washed up in Africa. The debris that they found, and again, this was not the official search, but this was civilians, found debris in Africa, but the crash site is off the coast of Australia. The currents down in Australia flow to the east. I've repeatedly posted several images of the currents, which I'll put in the replies here in just a second for you guys as well. The debris, if you look at the drift analysis, should have all washed up in Western Australia, not in Africa. And if you remember, if you're old enough to remember what happened, people were very confused why debris was being found in Africa. It made no sense. It's actually literally impossible for that stuff to have gotten there, especially because a lot of it was found within like 16 months after the plane disappeared. And that's not enough time for the debris to even get there. And so and some of the debris even had burn marks on it, which is interesting because the scenario I put forth is a fire event. One of the plane's being teleported to the west near the Maldives, and that it ends up in Diego Garcia. And if you look at the images that I'll post here in a second, I put a little dot on the map, on this ocean current map that has Diego Garcia on it. And if you look at those currents, you'll find that a much better location for the debris to have gotten into the water is at Diego Garcia. Now, the last argument I would make is that not only now do I think that we've ruled out the South Indian Ocean because the debris is not consistent with a South Indian Ocean crash, that there's not even enough debris to quantify a crash. There should be thousands of pieces of debris, not just 20 tiny pieces that account for less than 1% of the total plane. Not one body, not one piece of luggage, not any significantly sized pieces of debris. The flaperon is probably the biggest one, which is 8 feet long, but the wings of the plane are 100 feet long. So just to give you guys some perspective, this is how, as well, and I don't want to be rude to anybody, but this is how the media lies to you, is they present these ideas to you without the context. They don't tell you about the serial number using a part number or not the unique plate number. They don't tell you that the debris is too far away, that it couldn't have drifted that far. They just, all the facts that would break down the lie, they just don't tell you about. And this is what's sad too about the Netflix documentary, is that the Netflix documentary touches on like 10% of the evidence, I would say, based on what we've uncovered, which is probably why it's such a terrible, terrible documentary, and why people, like, when they watch it, they just doesn't really feel as good when you watch like a really good documentary that educates you, because a real documentary would dig into all this evidence and have you come up with a conclusion. And that's what I've tried to do. So that's a great question, though. It's probably one of the most common ones I get around the debris. So I'll go ahead and post in the replies right now so that people can see the actual debris drift, as well as the one that actually shows where the debris was found with Diego Garcia, with the currents, and with the search area as well, so that you can see, you know, if you just use your common sense, once again, there's no chance this plane crashed in the South Indian Ocean.
Thanks very much. And I posted the radar picture that you shared on the what was the podcast you were on the other night? I was watching it.
Yeah, Alex Stein.
Yes, that was an excellent interview. He did a great show. You're currently on a bit of a podcast tour. I appreciate you doing this space. What else do you have coming up right now?
Oh boy. Yeah, you know what? It's been wild. I've been trying to pull back because I've just been doing so many, but I've got like already 4 set up for next week. So gonna be talking to Diamond of Oppenheimer Ranch, Daryl, who I feel bad because I don't know Daryl's last name on this, but Mel from the Project Veritas, which is different than James O'Keefe's Project Veritas. I do have a thing set up as well with Mike from Health Ranger in the future, and currently working through some others as well. But end of the day, at this point, I'm not really in like a huge rush for any of this stuff. Like, as you saw, I've kind of pivoted towards the free energy side. I mean, I had retired from the case on the 10-year anniversary, and then I had done the redacted interview, and that was really big. And then the debunkers came back out of the woodwork to try to debunk the videos again, and I wasn't going to let that stand unabated. And then so things got really huge again. People like the Hodge twins started retweeting. But now, once again, I want to be trying to focus on proving the science is real. And if people still want to talk about, you know, the MH370 stuff, I think it's fine. But even the debunkers at this point kind of admit that this thing has entered the zeitgeist now. Like these videos are never going away. This case is never going away. And so it's not really a rush. Like we've waited 10 years for answers. And like I said before, we have to get people to wake up to what kind of technology the military industrial complex and the private defense contractors have. And as that continues to happen, I think more and more people will want to talk to me and help get the information out there. So I'm just taking it in stride, treating it like a marathon. Not in a rush to, try to prove the case or force the issue or anything like that.
Go ahead, Miss S.
Thanks for the mic, Jonathan. Hi, Ashton. It's great to meet you by voice anyway. I'm wondering if it's true that the pieces of debris, there's about 20, that the first one is the only one that wasn't found by the same person. I forget, Bill something.
Blaine Gibson. Yeah.
Blaine, thank you. Is that true that he 16 months later and in a short period of time is the one in different locations, Africa and Madagascar? He's the only one that's found debris?
He's not the only one. I don't know the exact number, but so Jeff Wise went hard on this guy on the Netflix documentary. And it's funny because I hated the Netflix documentary before I even watched or saw these videos, just because I thought it was just so terrible, especially when Jeff Wise was trying to vilify this random expatriate that was 60 years old. This guy is not a spy. And Jeff Wise needed him to be a Russian spy because for Jeff Wise's story of the plane going to Russia, all that debris has to be fake. And this is the problem with a lot of some other people's stories. They need so much of the evidence to be fake. The only evidence we need to be falsified is the satellite pings after 1840, which is when we think this plane's getting warped out of the sky in the Nicobar Islands. And that's the difference between some of these people's narratives out there. Also, any narrative that says that the plane was shot down anywhere, basically, but especially the ones that say it was shot down the South China Sea or something like that, debris is not getting into Africa from those places either. So all of those people basically need this debris to have been planted. And who else to pin that on than this guy, Blaine Gibson, who's just some random American expatriate. If you don't know what expatriate means, it just means an American that lives overseas. And I knew when I'm watching the Netflix documentary, I'm pretty good at a judge of character. Some of you guys probably are as well. I only have to watch this guy for a couple minutes to know that this guy's a genuine guy. He's not some Russian plant or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely not a Russian plant.
Yeah.
I have not, I was not aware of the videos that you're speaking about. Can you just kind of tell me what's in them so I can keep up?
The MH370 videos? Oh, you haven't seen them?
No.
We got to post those.
Yeah, can we post those somehow? If somebody can go through my profile or something, put them into the nest.
I've got
I think I posted them a week and a half ago or so. I'm probably overdue to post them again, honestly. I usually try to post them every couple of weeks, but one of them is called Satellite Video, Airliner and UFOs. That's the first one that came out. And this is the one where people have no idea of what they're even looking at. And what we were able to figure out and deduce, and now I think we've got a lot of corroborating evidence, is that the military uses Google Earth mixed with, it may be Quick Train Modeler, but let's just say some software that allows them to pull satellite data from the satellites that are in orbit and use their sensor data to rebuild a tracking system that they can use. And I haven't posted this, but I also found some evidence that seems to show that they can log into the system and then start a project up and probably pick a location and pick a time and then make a video based on that. What I did find, which I thought was really interesting, is that there's only 5 optical satellites left in orbit in the United States. And yet we probably have over 100 or so. So that means that most of our satellites are not optical. We're not looking through satellites anymore. We're pulling sensor data. This is similar to what NASA does, like when NASA sent their probe past Jupiter, or I mean, not Jupiter, but Pluto, probably Jupiter too, actually. Because they're not optically looking there. They're pulling sensor data and then they're rebuilding an image. And that's most likely how it works nowadays. It seems it's more efficient, as well as a lot of these satellites that are low Earth orbit. They're moving too quickly to be looking down through them that way either. So this satellite video, both videos show a Boeing 777, and it shows it doing what we think is an emergency descent / turning maneuver, like it's going to land in the ocean or something like that. The satellite video, I think the thing that's amazing about the satellite video is you can actually watch the orientation of the orbs in this perfect 120-degree sinusoidal pattern, which is like an equilateral triangle spinning around the plane. Right away, most people notice, like, what are they doing? They're doing something. Like doing something with purpose. And what we've been able to deduce from that is that they are actually mapping the plane, like trying to figure out exactly how big this endothermic event, this wormhole, if it is actual wormhole, how big it has to be. And then after they get about halfway through, they switch their orientation from mapping the plane to then going into a situation where they're in a ring formation around the plane. And this is potentially because they're getting ready to, induce this singularity, I'll call it. So the first one, that one is interesting because you're tracking the plane and the person has cropped the screen. They've cropped out the drone. The perspective moves, which I think is a very hard detail to fake, because this means that if somebody faked this video, they faked a giant field of view and then they cropped it. Why would you do that in a hoax video? If you're doing it in a real video because your screen is much bigger, like because it's a real tracking system, then it makes sense. But for a hoax video to do more work than you need to, and then to crop it afterwards, makes very little sense. And then the thermal, the drone video, which technically they're both infrared, but these are, at least the drone video is like a multispectral camera. So it's well beyond any type of commercial infrared camera. And it's got a thermal layer on it, so we can actually tell the temperatures. And this one was definitely filmed for intelligence purposes. There's so much you can glean from just the way the camera operator uses the camera from this. We can see accurate shake when the camera zooms in, indicating that we're looking at a real camera. There's a lag as well, where the operators have struggling to keep the plane in the center of the screen or in the field of view. Whereas if it was a hoax video, that the plane would just be like in the middle of the screen or on the screen the entire time. And we can see heat signatures on the orbs. Like you can tell when you see the heat signatures on the orbs, you see this dark, cold lines in front of the orbs, which is hard to see in the original. But if you do color changed versions of it, you can very clearly see this black line in front of the orbs. And that's what's pulling them forward along. It's like some kind of warp drive creating space in front of them, or like a gravity well, if you want to think of it like that. And these details, nobody's ever seen any details like this. They've never seen these heat signatures on orbs. Nobody's ever seen these gravity wells ever, not in any fake video or real video. And I mean, when you just look at the plane in the drone video, it's like you're looking at a 100% overlay of MH370, not just a Boeing 777, but like you just put it right over the top of MH370. If you just click on my profile, you look at my banner, that's MH370 with the drone video superimposed right over the top of it. And you can see it's extremely detailed as well when you look at that. It has, and the videos in general, when you look at them, they have this aura of like, what the hell am I looking at? This is crazy, and doesn't stick out like CGI like a lot of stuff does when you look at CGI. It doesn't have some cheesy feel to it. And then the drone video as well, the biggest thing is probably when the orbs converge on the plane. And this is because everything we're seeing is scientifically accurate. It's just not scientifically accurate with like mainstream accepted science. But when the plane converges, it is consistent with Coulomb's law, which would state that the electric charge increases exponentially as the distance between two electric forces converge, at least two same attracting forces. So the idea that if you take two magnets and try to jam them together, similar idea, where the repulsive force becomes stronger the closer they get together. Same kind of idea with Coulomb's law, and this is why the orbs converge at the last second as well. I think that they're increasing their energy and like a field of energy around the plane so high that it breaks something called the Schwinger limit, which Salvatore Paez, he had to fight with the patent office to convince them that it was even possible to break the Schwinger limit to get energy densities that are like, I think 10 to the 32 or 10 to the 33, extremely big number. And that's what I think is producing the singularity, maybe even producing a gravity wave, if you want to think of it like that, where then this is allowing this plane to like teleport. Now, I'm not talking Star Trek teleport, but like a slingshot this plane from one place to another, like a shortcut in space-time. And that's where like you look at that, and especially the way that they zoom in, the operator does, and then zoom out right before the event happens, it tells you they were expecting something. People say, well, why isn't this aliens? Well, because we weren't just randomly filming a plane in the middle of the ocean. People say, well, who's filming this and why are they filming this? Why is there a drone filming this plane? That is a very smart question, but there's really only one answer, isn't there? They didn't randomly film this plane while orbs all of a sudden showed up. This was a planned operation, and you can tell from how close the drone is to the plane that it must be a planned operation, and that those orbs must be our orbs. There's no little aliens inside those orbs. When you look at them from the satellite video, their movements are too exact. It looks like it's something that would be run by a computer program that or they're being controlled, or they have some kind of homing capabilities or something like that. So in my opinion, the drone video is being filmed because they want to give this intelligence back to the engineers that built these orbs so that people can see how they work. Plus, in my opinion, at least I think, unless somebody can show me another video, this is the first and only video that's ever been in the public sphere and public realm that shows any kind of endothermic event, which is an absorption of energy. That's why it's black and cold in the drone video. So it's an absorption of energy that nobody's ever seen before. Thomas Bearden called it a cold explosion in 1985. And it may also be the first ever wormhole as well, if that is really a wormhole. And then you could think, well, that's why you would record it, right? You want to have that recorded if you have that technology so that you can show people and go, okay, how do we make this better? How do we advance this technology? So I truly believe, just to close this off, finish this thought, that those videos, the most important videos in the history of humankind, at least from the public realm. There might be other crazier stuff out there if they've got this, but the most important videos we've ever seen, because they prove that not only is gravity manipulation possible, but space-time manipulation is possible. It goes beyond just hovering UFOs. We're literally talking about being able to create a wormhole here and teleport an object. And this also then leads to the idea that free energy is possible. Because if we can produce negative energy like we need in order to be able to make a wormhole or warp drive, according to all conventional science right now, then we can also potentially extract unlimited negative energy from the ether itself. And that's how I ended up getting into this idea of free energy in there. So I know it was a little bit long-winded, but there's your answer on those videos.
Wow, that's fascinating. It has my head going 3,000 different directions.
Yeah, let me address that real quick too, because when I first saw those videos and started to realize that they must be real, just because of all the small details, I've never experienced such ontological shock in my whole life. Like I said in the beginning of this, a year ago, I probably wouldn't have believed any of this stuff myself. So it actually got to the point, I've said this before, but I went over to my parents' place one night and I went, guys, is this Truman Show? Is the Truman Show happening right now? Is Ashton Kutcher punking me right now? Is this some elaborate prank that you guys are all in on, that you're like hoaxing on me? Because I couldn't even understand, because I follow science and physics and stuff like that. And I was just like, how is this possible? I expected pretty much anything to happen before this. So for the people that do start to come to terms with I call it the awakening of realizing that we're getting lied to about some pretty crazy advanced technology, is that you have to take it in stride. Is that you have to just kind of like let the information absorb. Don't try to think too hard about where this all comes from and why, et cetera, because you can kind of drive yourself a little nutty with respect to some of those answers. And you have to remember that, like, even if all this is real, even if our universe is like the holographic principle, people say simulation, whatever, it doesn't diminish our lives or anything like that. In fact, I look at it and I go, wow, this is awesome, because this can mean that like we could enter Star Trek age like tomorrow if we could get this technology out. So I look at it in a good way.
Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying. I think the word was ontological shock. My day, at least for our government, and having that kind of shock was January 6th, because it was this moment that I'll never forget. On the phone, my family's telling me what's going on, and that isn't happening in front of my face, and some other things. And there was a point at which I realized exactly that it was the corruption is that deep. So I might be a step closer to, because I fully believe that what you're telling me can absolutely be true. I know that they have technology that we've paid for the record, that they keep power with, basically, and money and all of those other things. So it's not that big of a leap for me
Yeah, if I
to
could. Oh.
believe these types of things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I kind of want to agree with you there. I don't generally try to talk politics too much because I think that this issue should cross political boundaries. But I was surprised to find that more people on the right were open to this information than people on the left when I first started. Because I would have thought the people on the left would be the ones, when I was my dumb CNN brain thinking like, oh, the people on the left are the logical ones that will come to terms with this information quicker, and the people on the right are the dumb religious people, blah blah blah. And first of all, I want to say is this information has made me more spiritual and religious as I've dug into it, but it actually was the exact opposite of what I expected. Exact opposite. It was the people on the left in general, not unequivocally, but in general, that have a harder time believing that their government would lie to them about something this huge. And the people on the right, like you said, like you had your own experiences, that the government's hiding and lying stuff, and that they can lie to the whole world, and the media will lie to the world and convince people that it was a suicidal pilot that crashed without us tracking it, without leaving a debris field and all this other stuff. And I had a similar experience as you, where for me, the first thing was probably COVID when that started happening. And I work in healthcare and I don't see people falling over dead everywhere. That was a big wake up call for how people would have this mass formation psychosis develop, and everybody would just start believing something because social media was hyping it up. And I'm not to diminish COVID in general. I know that people did die, but it wasn't the plague as the media would try to convince us it was. And then I actually was following all the BLM riots that happened up until January 6th. I would watch all the streams online. I remember watching January 6th riots, and people were telling me while I was watching it, like, are you watching this insurrection happen? And I'm like, well, I'm watching Baked Alaska call for a pizza from like Nancy Pelosi's office or something like that. It seems more like a LARP than it seems like an insurrection. And I know people will get very political about that as well, but that's also where I realized, like, whoa, and then after that, they were talking about how many officers died and no officers actually died and all this stuff. And you start to realize that the media really does craft a perception of events for people out there. And that's what they did with MH370 10 years ago, was they crafted a perception of events that was counter to all the evidence, and that the whole world ate it up. And that's what I think is the darkest thing about this for me, is realizing that the United States government controls all the Western media, and that they can convince people of basically anything, even counter to complete reality that's out there. But it's important. The last bit I'll say is it's important that we understand that, because then we can craft our strategy against it with respect to revealing this information. It also helps you understand why it's very difficult to get disclosure from any type of disclosure you're trying to get, because you're going against the most powerful propaganda and misinformation apparatus on the entire planet. So I'm going to tie this real quick to the free energy thing. People go, well, why aren't you open sourcing it? And I go, well, what did I just tell you with respect to the misinformation? The moment that that's open source, you're going to have like 10 people looking at your open source model and going, this is fake, this doesn't work. They're going to say, I replicated it and it doesn't work. And then everybody's going to say that's been debunked. I know that because that's exactly what they did with LK99. Exactly that. And so for me, that's not the approach. For me, the approach is, I know the over unity system works. I know the person who's built it, and I've seen how it works and been told how it works. I'm just going to sell it to people, and then people are going to have it, and they're going to know it works, and they're not suing me because they know it works. And eventually it'll hit a critical mass where then people will realize, oh, this is not a joke. This is real. So that's my approach. That's why my approach is not open source. Although I, support everybody that does want to try to open source it. I truly believe that information has been out there in the public realm, and nothing's ever happened with it. So we got to try something different.
So that's a great segue into the free energy, because that was one of the questions that people have told me they want to ask you is why don't you open source this? Because it seems like for the benefit of humanity, it would benefit all of us if we had equal access to this technology. So is your plan to commercialize it and sell it in the hopes that getting it out there, and then the more that it's out there, that it will be able to be duplicated and the cost brought down to where it's available to more people? Because if the numbers I heard tossed around for how much one of these devices, let's say a whole home device, would be anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, and the nature of it is that we don't really have a set price. It's going to really be based on some factors, including how much energy people want. But yeah, that's a fair assessment, I would say. And people say, well, that's a lot of money. And I would say is if you look at some of the other free energy devices that are out there, over unit devices that people are promoted, they're going to be much more expensive than that. I mean, somebody showed me one that was in Africa that was like the size of like multiple porta potties stacked on top of each other. So devices like that are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I don't even know how easily reproducible they are. So yeah, first of all, what I would say is that I don't want to open source it because I don't want a million people fake debunking it. And then the other side of it is eventually the information is going to get out there for sure. The more you sell it to people, eventually somebody's going to squeal, break their NDA, or put on an anonymous mask and show it on the YouTube or whatever. And then it's going to get out there. But I want to hit critical mass with people that I think are credible, that will speak to the fact that it works before we get to that point so that it can't be suppressed. And this is why the strategy that I worked out with the entity I signed the NDA with when they told me how it worked was to do an alpha rollout where we would select people that we think, obviously have the money that are willing to do it, people that we think are credible, that will be, quiet about it and not get it out there and adhere to the NDA, and then various other factors, which I've put out there as well. So we're trying something a little bit different. There's no guarantee of it working. Absolutely. I also think that there's maybe the people in the background that know this stuff is real in general, maybe they're giving us a, go ahead and see if you can make it work kind of thing. Because they clearly haven't shut it down yet. But we'll see how it plays out. I also think that the fact people say, well, why would they partner with you? And the answer on that is I've got a big reach. They've seen me going through the science, and I've been told through back channels and sources that, some of the scientists that are the engineers that are in these private labs are rooting for me on the background, because they can't talk about a lot of stuff openly through their NDAs. But if a random person figures it out and has no NDA, and as long as I'm doing it in not a way that's going to, threaten the world or threaten, U.S. defense, then, they're kind of for it. I think there's a lot of people out there. I think there's warring factions in the government. Some of them want to keep it hidden. Some of them want to get it out. This is why disclosure is so tough in the UFO community. And the ones that want to hide it, it's pretty tough to stop a guy who's got 140,000 followers, where if they were to just disappear, it's going to be extremely suspicious. It's still possible, but tough. And then the people that want it out, that's a big boon, is that this guy's just putting the information out there. So end of the day, the way I see it playing out is pretty much what you said, Jonathan, which is that we get it in the hands of some people that can afford to buy it early on while the price is still high, try to get the prices down, potentially by having, scaling up production afterwards, if we don't get shut down, so that we get more economies of scale, and then we can start bringing it to more and more people that can afford it. While at the same time, somebody will probably end up leaking it. And then from that point, hopefully people don't incorrectly build it. Because if you've watched my stream I did with Thomas Bearden, who I think is probably one of the most important engineers of the last 30 years, he talks about that it requires tuning for some of these devices as well. It's not a situation where you can just put it together and you're going to get it to work. You actually have to set up I don't know if it's the flux or the fields or whatever it takes for it to be able to produce energy from the ether correctly. So that's my big concern, similar to LK99, where they were like, oh, you just mix copper and lead and cook it and then you'll get LK99. But you have to follow the recipe correctly. And a lot of the people didn't follow the recipe correctly. And then they didn't get the LK99 results that Korea and China were seeing. And that's my concern with this as well, is that if it gets out there, people are going to follow the recipe incorrectly. They're going to claim to have debunked it, and then it'll die out again, as opposed to going through a source that can produce it correctly, that can prove that the device works. And so the next step for me is to, now that I know and I've seen it remotely, go there in person and do a filming session where we somehow don't show the exact inner workings of the device, but show with meters that is actually producing over Unity. One thing I was told that I could say, where's my list here, is that the device, for example, has 11 volts in and 9 watts in, and it's producing 11 volts out and at least 18, maybe up to 21 watts out, which if you guys can do math, that's COP of 2 or higher. And so to be able to show that and potentially have devices charging off of it or running off of it so that they can see that, and try to figure out a way where we can show it where it's convincing enough so that we can get people on board. Now, last thing I'll say is I've already had a bunch of people reach out, either directly or through the email. And I haven't read all the emails yet, but I've gotten over 30 or 40 already for people that are seriously interested, that seriously, I think, do have the money and want to try it out. And I put out the challenge out there. So if there are big YouTubers or podcasters or whatever that want to have their electrical engineer experts look at it, that we can prove it to them if they're willing to sign an NDA. And some people, I think, have already seen some criticism. Oh, well, I'm a random nobody, but you won't let me do it. Well, yeah. I mean, we literally can't just let every single person do it. Plus, if I let some random nobody see it and you come out and say, yeah, it's right, like, who's going to believe you? No one. The whole point is we need like credible people that have big platforms so that if they see it and they have to admit that it's real, that then there's some level of credibility behind it. So if you know anybody out there, any big podcasters, I try to follow the people that were linked to me that have several 100,000 followers or whatever. Let me know if they're interested, because that is a real challenge.
I will say that I am interested. However, I do not have $30,000 to $60,000, but I will take one if one is available. All joking aside, I did post a link to an archived webpage that goes over several, I think about 60 examples of energy technology being suppressed and the methods used to suppress it. Also a link to LK99, which is the room temperature superconductor. What are your thoughts on Malcolm Bindle's thunderstorm generator? Have you done any research into it?
Oh, yeah. And I talked to Malcolm and he messaged me earlier today. Yeah, I'm going to meet him next week, actually, at Cosmic Summit. So shout out to Cosmic Summit and George Howard's thing there. I don't know if it's sold out. I'm going to try to get some people some virtual passes to watch online. I'm also going to probably try to bring my camera and record a couple of things. It's going to be tough because I'm not going to have my computer, but I'll try to do my best for you guys. I think the thunderstorm generator is legit. I think I was talking to Bob Greenier about it a couple weeks ago as well. The only question is whether or not it's truly an over unity device. I think that it absolutely is producing basically no emissions, which is huge because at a bare minimum, you can hook this up to your car as like a extension or like a downloadable content, if you want to think of it for my video game players out there. And now your car basically produces zero emissions. So, and I don't know if it's carbon monoxide. I think it's carbon monoxide is the big one versus carbon dioxide. I can't remember which one. Both of them go down a lot, but one of them goes down by like 99%. And that's already huge. You can imagine just for green energy purposes. And then whether or not the plasmoids in there and the configuration that he has actually produces over unity is a separate question. But I do believe that plasmoid research is the secret to cold fusion, low energy nuclear reactions. And now I'm sure as well, my own opinion, that this is also requires an ether to be able to achieve over unity from cold fusion. And then I think that they use basically the same underlying science and concepts. And that's probably why that's also been suppressed and difficult to obtain. So the device that I'm promoting, though, is an electromechanical device. It's not based on plasma research. It's not a fusion device or anything like that. But I do think that the underlying science is the same. And I think that Malcolm Bindle's legit. He's been actually on an island in the Maldives for like 7 years working on this stuff, which is wild to me. And apparently he's had some attempts on his life, supposedly. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I've been heard. And, I think there's other stuff going on behind the scenes where people are testing those devices. Now he's doing it open source as well, I believe. So like you can see how it's set up and it's relatively simple, his setup. Like you can actually like buy those components at like the pet store and stuff like that. And then the hardest part is just having somebody who can do like metal fabrication to create these like circular dome inside of a dome at the right ratios. Because like you think you pump water one way and then the other direction you pump the CO2 or something like that, or the exhaust. And that's how kind of the main mechanism works. So I think that's really cool. And I'm a big supporter of it and I can't wait to see how it works.
Let's, if you're okay with it, we've got a few requests in the audience. I know some people are trying to stay up. Are you good with bringing people up now?
I mean, yeah, let's go nuts, man. And for the record, like I'm an open book. Like one thing about me, I think that why people gravitate towards me is that I pretty much answer every single question as openly and honestly as I can. You can tell from my answers that I'm not making stuff up in general. I think very rarely, if ever, I have to say that I can't say or whatever. So the only thing I can't really speak to with respect to the NDA, because a lot of people have questions about why I signed the NDA and what it means. And the entity I signed the NDA with is not trying to silence me. They give me assurances. I just can't speak any specifics about how the device exactly works. I can speak in generalities about the concepts. And it doesn't stop me from talking about any of the other MH370 or gravity stuff that I talk about either. So just want to put that out there.
Thanks very much. And Miss S, I apologize. I can't make you co-host right now. It's glitchy as hell. But before we get to the questions, Ashton, Doomer Daddy down there in the please mute your mic. Thank you. Down in the audience wanted me to pass a message that Game Tech Politics had some new intel for you regarding radar data. So he said you knew him. I'm passing the message along. So consider the message passed.
Yeah, if he's out there listening or anyone knows Game Tech, I know he's a guy who's seemingly has some connections out there. Have him just direct message me, and I'll look into that later. But thanks, Ulrich. I think Doomer Daddy's Ulrich, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that is Ulrich. We're going to go to Connecticut Kid 82 first. And if anyone is disrespectful to the guest, you will be removed from the stage. So go ahead, Connecticut.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Jonathan. I just gave you a follow. Ashton, thank you for what you've been doing. This is very, very interesting. I just wanted to ask Ashton if he spent any time or any effort trying to reach out to Dr. Stephen Greer. I know Dr. Stephen Greer is kind of trying to focus on the government aspect of UAP disclosure, but I know he's touched on the over Unity tech. I'm just curious if that's something that was on Ashton's radar. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. It's honestly one I get a lot. It's funny because before all this, I didn't know what to think of Dr. Stephen Greer. And the reason why I refer to him as doctor versus a lot of other people is he's literally a medical doctor. He was an ER physician, and worked in healthcare my whole life. So I always respect people that work in the healthcare facility or healthcare industry. And that's why a lot of the nurses that follow me, if ever I see a nurse follows me, I immediately follow them back because I have the highest levels of respect for those people. I was very skeptical of Dr. Greer for the same reason a lot of people were around like the CE5 stuff and some of the stuff that he says about aliens. It's kind of like hard to he comes up with his own motivations for the aliens and things like that, which could be plausible. But what I've learned is that from the technological perspective, he's dead on. Like he's on the money. I think the biggest mistake he made was not learning how the science worked himself, especially as somebody who's a doctor. I feel like he should have dug into it and figured out how it worked himself. So that when he did interviews, he didn't just have to say, oh, yes, and we have these teleportation technologies and gravity manipulation technologies. And then he would actually be able to explain them in detail. But a lot of the interviews that I've reviewed are actually from Stephen Greer's archives, where Dr. Greer talks with Thomas Bearden, Paul, I think it's Size or Cheeses. I don't know how to say his last name correctly. But the thing that people really should be doing, I think, and this goes back to the question earlier about how to get disclosure, is like talk to the engineers that are working in the private labs, the ones on the special access programs. Those are the ones that know what's really going on, especially regarding the technology. So 100% agree with Dr. Greer on the technology side. I'm not sure about Ambassador Bijou, Andromeda Galaxy, CE5 stuff. It might be real. I just don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was kind of, focused on the tech aspect of it. That's all. I was wondering what you thought about that. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, but he's solid on the tech stuff. And I did try to reach out like through intermediaries. I am in contact with one of his, he has ambassadors or something like that. He's like an ambassador program. And one of them does direct message me back and forth a little bit. And I remember she told me that he had seen the MH370 videos and he was familiar with them. I think that he's more interested in people that are firsthand whistleblowers out there. But I also generally see Dr. Greer as like a different faction than some of the other people out there. Like I would put Dr. Greer in one faction and then like the Lou Elizondo camp in a different faction that's out there. And Lou Elizondo is probably allied with people like, Jeremy Corbell, maybe Gary Nolan. And I don't know this stuff for a fact. That's how I kind of see it. And I think a lot of the people in like the Soul Foundation are probably more on like the Lou Elizondo side, whereas Dr. Greer is kind of on his own island out there. So I just think it's interesting, all these little factions and what have you. And for me, I don't want to be allied with any of them, honestly. As much as I think even Dr. Greer's right about the technology, I would rather just see the stuff about the technology and see if it corroborates what I've been doing and not tie my wagon to them. I've learned my lesson. I'm not tying my wagon to anybody after Kim.com. Great
Thanks
question.
very
though.
much for the question, Connecticut kid.
Here's
Let's
chat.
go to Crom.
Hey, thank you. Obligatory. I always have to join the spaces and just say,
Guys.
Ashton's not a liar. He's not a grifter. This technology is real. It's been suppressed for as far back as Tesla, maybe even longer. I implore everyone to look into some of these scientists and these defense contractors. Definitely Thomas Bearden. Definitely revisit Tesla's work. Malcolm Bendall is a great suggestion. Just a ton of these people and the people who are on the precipice of this information. Ashton, absolutely a noble cause. I consider you like a hero for really pushing this stuff out. I know you wouldn't, but keep doing what you're doing. I'll support you the whole way. Guys, look into this stuff yourselves. You don't have to believe us. It's real. It's here. We're bringing the ether back. It's been misunderstood, suppressed. It's really not hard to understand, and it's not boring. Okay, dig into scalar physics, plasma physics, particle physics. Like this stuff is not boring. It's literally the most interesting thing you could ever look into. I'll rest my case there. The whole videos thing, I never put too much weight into it anyways. If there's any debunkers listening, get fucked. I've had good conversations with some of them. Thank you for keeping this case alive. Thank you for making us dig our heels in and really get to the bottom of this. It's just amazing what's happening right now. And just, keep paying attention. Follow Ashton, follow Jonathan. We're not done here. This is the beginning. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Crom, and thanks to everybody else who's been pushing for the information in general. I don't generally consider myself a hero. I'm a normal guy, and I make mistakes, and I'm flawed like all humans that are out there. And I don't know. I hope I'm able to speak freely about this stuff for a while to come. But enjoy it while it is, for sure. Where I can talk about it as freely as I can, because who knows what'll ever happen in the future if I ever get that ScarJo clone. But I just want to say that Crom was saying, the technology and the science is out there. If anything, I think what I've done is given like a framework for how people can investigate stuff like this. And I would also agree that like the wildest part is we don't even need the videos anymore because of how much evidence around the missing plane we were able to find, as well as all the evidence around the suppressed science. It just happens that all that suppressed science and all the evidence around the missing plane coincides with the videos being real as well. And I just think that I like watching the videos, even though I'm glad we did that moment of silence at the beginning, because I think it is really important to remember there was 239 people on that plane that, we don't know for a fact that they were murdered or killed, but they're not around. Nobody's seen them in 10 years. So it's a safe assumption. But when I watch those videos, especially when I watch like the blue and black color change one, it's beautiful to watch. The technology, the perfect movements. It is like you're just seeing something that's just incredible. So I like to watch them from time to time. Anyway, that's all. Thanks, Crom.
Thanks very much, Crom. Let's go to Roland.
Yeah, we're bringing the ether back.
Hey, I just wanted to say it's been a great space. I've learned quite a bit here, but I did join kind of midway through. I wanted to make some remarks about some comments I heard earlier about how do we kind of force disclosure. And, somebody else said earlier, people often believe, the top comments. So I just wanted to say to people, when you start to see the comments that are relevant to this field, make sure you like them, interact with them. And that's a good way that we can kind of force disclosure on that front. And I also had a question for Ashton regarding this device. Are you going to be doing a demo with it? And if you are, what's that going to kind of look like?
Yeah, great question. Still trying to figure out exactly how to do it, but the biggest problem is we can't show the actual inner workings of the device. So that's the biggest drawback. Unfortunately, I think no matter what, any demo, even if we showed the actual device, there's going to be people that still won't believe, no matter what. So the way I imagine is either just blur out the device or cover it up, have the readers or whatever, the electrical readers that show the outputs and inputs set up on it so that people can see that it's actually producing over unity, like I was describing a few minutes ago, explaining how there's like 9 watts in and 18 watts out, which is like COP of 2 or greater, to show them people that way. And then for individuals, like, because again, I'm not trying to convince everybody out there. So it's like the people that want to buy it, those people we would want to make sure that they feel comfortable, and that if they want to see it firsthand, they can fly out and see it firsthand. Because I mean, if you're willing to spend the kind of money to get one of these devices, then buying a plane ticket for a couple of days isn't really going to break the bank. And then they could see it themselves firsthand and see how it works firsthand, as long as they sign the NDA. And then same thing for like the challenge. This is why the challenge is really targeted on people that are big influencers in the electrical engineering space. Because we can't have every single person come out and see and have every single person sign an NDA. The more people like that we do, the more risky it is that everything gets out there. And you may say, well, what's the downside of it all getting out there? I think it probably will happen. But it's not my intellectual property to give away. And what I tell people too is that, would you work for free? And at the end of the day, even if it does get out there, the technology, like that's where I think the problem's going to come in, where people are going to say that it can't possibly work. It's really just a matter of like people need to see it with their own eyes. So that's why we're going about in this controlled fashion related to it. If anybody does have ideas on how you can prove it without like actually showing the inner workings of the device, let me know. That is the thing I'm thinking about probably the most between now and I'm not going to say exactly when I'm going to go out there, because there is some chance of like literally getting disappeared. I don't really buy into that too much, but I'm not going to exactly like say what my travel plans are to the world. But yeah, if you guys have insights onto that, DM me or post in the Discord or in my replies or whatever. So yeah, thanks.
Hey, that's a great response. One other quick question real quick regarding the device. I don't know if you can speak on this or not, but is this like the first iteration of this device, like Mark 1? And what do you kind of see like the end game being for this device, like at its full potential?
So the devices have been built to spec so far, and over 30 of them have been produced. I think they're all based on the same concept, and they can be scaled up or down. So this is why there's not like a set price for it. In the alpha rollout, part of the information we'd be gleaning is where's the demand for like how much power, and to try to have an idea of like, okay, if we built an alpha or like a model like a Mark 1, exactly what should its configuration and size be. And so for this rollout, it's going to be like very customized to each individual's needs, built for each one, for each person that we consult with or what have you. And then for the end game, the way I see it playing out in an ideal world is that we get at least 1, maybe 2 electrical engineers, try to attract the attention of them to be willing to sign the NDA and come and see that it works, and that be willing to put on their YouTube, social media, whatever, that yes, it does work. And then to have, I don't know, I'm just going to throw a number out there, like at least 10 people that buy them and that we produce them for them over the next 6 months probably. And that those people then are the early adopters that can also confirm that it actually works, so that we could have, if necessary, testimonies from those people. And then from there, we'll see how it goes. Then we will go into the beta phase or whatever it is, and maybe have a specific model and a price point and all the stuff like that. And maybe even do investors and try to scale it up bigger. Right now, I'd say that I'm giving as much information as I can, which hopefully helps ease people's mind, is that I think that we can produce like 2 or 3 at a time or something like that right now. So it's not a situation where it's like 1 by 1, but it's not like a ton. So that's why we're really vetting down the people to just people that like we can kind of trust related to it, and that have the disposable income and that are, you know, excited about this kind of thing. I've already had some interest actually in people reaching out, so it's cool.
Hey, great
Thanks.
responses. Thanks for letting me speak. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your question. Before we get to El Jefe, I did post a link on archive.org to all of Nikola Tesla's published works, declassified military scientific paper abstracts, FBI documentation. It's about, I think it's at least over a gig of documents, PDFs. There is one of his books, The Secrets of Anti-Gravity. So check that out. There's a lot of, like Ashton said, this information's out there. It's up to us to find it, find it again and to replicate it. So I think it would be good. The more people that are looking into this, the better. And as far as how to show the energy, the over unity without showing the device, what if you could you show like a multimeter that's on the input showing the input voltage and wattage, and then a multimeter on the output, and just obscure the rest and show those? Is that a possibility?
That's basically the plan.
Everyone's going to say, well, it's two separate devices, but
yeah.
What do you think of that idea?
No, that like actually is what we've talked about. And multimeter, that was the word I was looking for. Multimeter, yes, multimeter. Yeah, having one on like either end or however it works to show. But then people are still going to say like, oh, they're hiding a battery in between or something. Like that's the problem in general with like people that are debunkers, is that there's a million excuses, infinite number of excuses that people will be able to give. But that's why at the end of the day, some people are going to have to take some leap of faith in terms of, okay, yes, I'm convinced. But that's also why we would allow people that are buying them to optionally come see the demo model firsthand. And I will say that the demo model is something that I've invested in with the manufacturer, with the entity, that I've had that going for several weeks, maybe even up to a couple months. We've been planning that out. So there has been machinations behind the scenes before we got to this point. It wasn't like this just happened and then I started announcing it. We've kind of been planning behind the scenes on it because we both thought, yeah, we need to have a demo model that people can actually see if they want to come and be convinced, because all the other ones basically been built ad hoc on demand, and they're with people who are clients out there. So it's not like we can go to somebody's house and be like, hey, show me that model I sold you, and bring people over. So that's the idea too. And people also say, are you going to have one? Well, technically I do, because I paid in for the demo model. But I'm not going to have people come into my house to see it. So for the short term, I don't have my own running right now, but I would think probably if this goes well, then I absolutely will, because I want one.
One other idea is, and I know people would say that it looks kind of like a magic trick, but let's say you're filming an open room and you roll in a opaque barrier, and then on the left side you roll in the device, and you would have to blur it in post so that people couldn't see it. And then you show the multimeters or multimeters being connected on the right side so that they can see that there's just the one device being brought in. I know that there's no perfect way to do it without showing the device, but just spitballing some ideas there.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I actually thought about just blurring it is probably the best way to do it too, especially now in 2024, where that's pretty easy to do with software. And then I might even be able to figure out how to do that myself, even though I'm not really good. Because the other way I was just going to put like a sheet or a cardboard box over it or something, but that's a little bit more mysterious as opposed to just blurring it. And then, yeah, what I was thinking, what you thought about rolling it in is good. I mean, I thought about just putting it on an elevated platform so that you can see that there's no excess wires or anything connected to anything else. But yeah, I don't know. It's a good recommendation. Still thinking through it. Still got a few weeks to go in terms of trying to figure all that out. Somebody else also mentioned in my chat, like just have a live stream on it 24/7 or something like that. Maybe. I'm not too worried about that in general. Like probably what we'll end up doing is, I don't know if we're going to have that configuration be able to be available. But have the thing continuously running like a fan or something like that for over a day and then coming back to it to see that it hasn't run out. Now, people, of course, will say you pulled some movie magic or whatever. But once again, we're not trying to convince everybody. We just want to have some plausible reason to believe that it's real for people that are out there that are doubters, but still, open-minded, I guess.
Let's go to El Jefe, and then I have a question from the audience, and then we'll go to Chaotic.
Hey, thanks, guys. Hey, Ashton, as a fellow data science analyst nerd in the healthcare space, how in the world did you find the time to research all this and not burn yourself out? And what is your current job said now that your name is out in the ether?
Yeah, good question, man. I wonder about the burning out thing myself. I will say that I've taken a lot more naps than I used to, and I just don't have any like free time anymore for anything, like even for watching TV. I used to play a lot of video games, and I haven't played a video game. Oh, I played a couple here and there, people know, but very, very, very rarely nowadays. So even though I was a nerd, now it's like my normal job. And then it's been working on this. And right now I'm basically working like 3 different jobs, which is like my normal job, my social media, and then also now this EtherTech company all at once, which at some point something's got to give. I will say too that various people have been told me hey, you need to make sure that you're rested and your mental health's good. That's the most important thing at this point. And I just tell them I'm doing good. If I needed a break, I would take it. My company, I did get in trouble for the first time last week when I was on that space with the debunkers or whatever, because I guess I was technically on my lunch break, but it ended up going for like 4 hours. So I guess my influence has gotten so big now that people are noticing at work. So I didn't lose my job, which is nice, but that's the reason why you guys didn't see any posts from me mainly during the day, except for on my lunch break where I made a couple of quick posts, was because I definitely needed to make sure that I was, making sure I hit all my obligations at work. Because I am trying to keep my job as long as possible. If this, free energy device thing, this EtherTech thing works out, then obviously I would be able to make the jump. But until that happens, probably not going to happen. And also, I'm not. I really don't want to try to be predatory with respect to the EtherTech thing. I want to take it in stride. And the reason why this stuff costs so much is because it literally is just that expensive to make, unfortunately, at this point. So I'm not trying to rip people off from that kind of thing. Which is what would be required probably for me to be able to quit my job. Even if 10 of these devices sell, between me and the other entity, it's still not going to be the kind of money that I make at my normal job. I will say lastly is that it is kind of stressful a little bit to think about if I would lose my job, how am I going to make ends meet? The benefit is that my social media has gotten big enough now where I wouldn't be making, I'd be making just a fraction of the money that I make in my normal job, but I could live off of it frugally, but I could survive. So that does make me feel a little bit more comfortable in general. But yeah, just a heads up, people think you make a lot of money off Twitter. You really don't. If you get millions and millions and millions of views, I'm pushing 10 million views a week or something like that, you still make probably less than you would make if you worked at a minimum wage job. So it's not as glamorous as people make it out to be, although it is, I would say I am blessed and privileged to be in a position where so many people are interested in what I have to say.
All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it. And do you have any just quick tips and tricks in researching? Because you were able to put a lot of things together in a short amount of time. So is there any tips or?
Yeah, you're breaking up, but I think I got you.
That you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing would be just kind of pace yourself. Now, with the MH370 situation, where it was a unique situation where there was this bulk of information that was out there already. And like I mentioned on a lot of my live streams, I've got over 100 tabs open or 100 windows open related to stuff that I've seen. I can't even catch up. I get more and more I find that I can actually close out and post. So I've got content for the next year or so out there. And with MH370 stuff, there was so much, I couldn't even believe how much stuff that we found that was out there. So that's why you don't even see me retweeting a lot of stuff of my older content, because there's just so much. And then when it came to the science side of it, yeah, there's also, I've been reading like 2 or 3 scientific papers every night. And that's helped me catch up a lot on a lot of the scientific concepts. And it really, you need to start at the beginning with a lot of that stuff, but just kind of take it in stride. And with respect to like how to approach social media, I follow this guy, Alex Flynn, who gave me some tips on stuff like don't spam hashtags, don't spam adding people, like maximum, never more than 2 hashtags, never more than 2 ats. Make your content pop out to people. So one thing I'll criticize Nassim Harim, I think his last name is. You know, he's a guy who I think understands the science, but when I read his content, it's just like one fat paragraph that's like a page long. Like, just don't be afraid to hit the enter key, you know, and separate your thoughts a little bit. And you know, be kind of exciting. Don't be afraid to ask questions as well, but don't engagement farm in terms of just like your thing being like, so you guys think the aliens are real? You know, like, you know, be it something that's a little bit original out there. And then with respect to presenting the content as well, like I always try to add images or a video for almost every post I make. It's not required, but I find that helps to engage people. So you'll find, especially in a lot of my research, usually there's at least 1 and a lot of times 4 different images, which is the maximum number you can post, so that people can actually see the images and stuff. And I think that all of those factors are the reason why my content has such a high percentage of engagement compared to other people that have similar numbers of followers. And that's, you know, you got to know how to play the game when it comes to social media, to how to get your message out there. And this is the reason why people like the entity wants to partner with me, is that I break down the content for the layman as well. Like I take the scientific concepts and try to explain it in normal terms. I try not to be very verbose. I try not to repeat any of my stuff. I try to keep all my video content very streamlined. Like I have little scripts that I do for my content when I post it out there, my clips that I take, and I edit them down. So that, you know, I just think about like when I want to read something, what do I want to see? So, yeah, that's pretty much what I would say on that front. I don't have any special tips in terms of how to search for content. Honestly, this is where MH370X has come into play, and they've posted a lot of the stuff that's out there. Sometimes I find other people's stuff on Twitter and what have you. People tag me and stuff. So yeah, just keep your eyes open, really.
Thanks very much for the question, El Jefe. And I want to add my own response because there's some interesting synchronicities in there. So fun fact, I used to work for Nassim Haramein. I was his IT manager and later project manager.
Really?
That's about all I can say because I am under NDA. I no longer work there. But yeah, I haven't heard his name come up since I've been on X, and that's just really quite a funny coincidence.
Whoa, that's weird. That's cool though. So yeah, Nassim Haramein, right? Yeah, I forgot. Sorry, I butchered his last name, but that's interesting that you're under NDA with him, and his content, out of all the people I've seen out there, is probably most closely aligned with what I think is the real science out there. If I had to criticize, which I'm not trying to necessarily put him down in any way, but I think that where a lot of people get lost is when you start trying to connect a lot of the esoteric concepts. And I'm not even saying it's wrong, but even when you start to dig into consciousness, like if I'm trying to get the technology out there, I just want to focus on the tech and the hard science. And that's been my path. So I think that once you start trying to, a lot of people try to connect to remote viewing, which there definitely is a connection. You know, if like there's an ether and all points in space and time are connected, then it does open the door to the idea of remote viewing. But what I like to tell people too, and also like stuff like sacred geometry, like, you know, sacred geometry can be the answer for Malcolm Bendel's thunderstorm generator and stuff like that. End of the day, though, to me, does it really matter what the foundation is for it? I just want to know that it works. And you have to kind of, I think of it like building a house and building your way up. Like start at the bottom with the hard concept, the hard scientific concepts, and work your way up towards the other ones. And try not to dilute your message, because the more you try to link to a lot of that stuff, the more you open yourself up to criticism. And the last thing I would say is that if you look at what Terrence Howard did on Joe Rogan, like he opened a lot of people's minds up, but he also then opened himself up to criticism where people were attacking 1 × 1 = 2. They always look for the weakest link in whatever you say. So they attacked him on the 1 × 1 = 2, the numerology stuff. They attacked him on the periodic table stuff as well, but they didn't really attack him on the ether stuff. They didn't really attack him on phase conjugation. So just keep that in mind if you're somebody out there who's really trying to wake people up.
Great points. And yeah, mentioning the NDA, I signed one when I was hired, so it's still in effect. Essentially, I need to get a copy of it though. Anyway, as far as the research goes, I would recommend a tool called Obsidian. Obsidian.md is the website. It's like an open source version of Notion. And I like it because it's all offline. So it's all text documents that you can link together, and you can visualize your notes and see the links between them. You can add media. You can also set it up with something like Dropbox, or I use a sync. I think it's Sync Trezor, which is an open source syncing tool. So you can sync it between your devices as well. There's a mobile app. So great research tool to take notes and then see the connections between them. Also the algorithm stuff, you mentioned Alex Finn. I also discuss the algorithm on my spaces occasionally. So if you're not already following me, I would appreciate it if you like X algorithm content. Or I also have an X Analytics website that I built. It's in my profile, Xelyzer, XLYZER.com. Right now it's free. You can download your CSV of your posts from analytics.twitter.com, upload them to my site, and I've got a lot more feature-packed visualizations. You can see who you respond to the most, for example, see when your posts do, what time they do the most impressions. And Ashton, if you are burning the candle at both ends like I am, then I hope it is a Caruso Candle Company candle. If it's not, then you can purchase one for about $25 on carusocandles.com. Link also in the bio. It is hard to make money on social media, so you got to plug occasionally. With that being said,
Real quick, I wanted to say that the Obsidian thing, as well as what Ian Carroll told me that he was using, which when I saw it, I was very impressed. So I might move to that because, guys, if you want to know my secret, I literally just been using Notepad. I literally just use Notepad and a bunch of notepads up, and then I just put like little links.
At least Notepad plus plus. Do you know Notepad plus plus?
Just straight up Notepad, guys. And I have a folder that's got all my little notepads saved. So, guys, when people think that like I made the videos, I just start laughing because I'm like, guys, I don't even know how to edit a video until like I started trying to edit my own clips, and I use fucking Notepad out here, guys. So it's I'm low, like I'm a boomer when it comes to technology, guys. At least when it comes to computer technology.
Okay, as an IT person, you're hurting my heart right now. We need to talk later. Let's go to chaotic before I get to the audience questions.
Hey guys, can y'all hear me okay?
Yep, you sound great.
Yeah.
I had to step outside for a second. I just got done making a casserole. So I've been milling about listening to this, and I'm a little disappointed to hear that Ashton's not going to hook up this anti-gravity machine he has to a bouncy castle and invite us all over to sleep over. I was promised that explicitly, and now I'm incredibly disappointed, and I might even file a lawsuit. You've been debunked, bitch. Just kidding. I'm so full of shit.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Well, I had an
goodness.
idea, a real one, not a pretend one, like all of my other best ideas. What if we hooked this up to a crypto mining rig and allowed people to watch it progressively mine crypto in real time through the blockchain on a wallet?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think the
That's my
bouncy
end.
castle thing is probably the best idea, honestly. Maybe we will.
Hey, I'm not-
Bouncy castle.
I'm not turning you down. I'm just gonna throw it all against the wall and see what sticks. I'm cooking up like spaghetti and shit tonight in this space. We could do it all, man. Let's do it all.
Yeah, the
Dream
so
your biggest dream.
first thing, and that sounds great, actually. But yeah, the first thing is this device is not powerful enough to lose weight and become anti-gravitic. I know a lot of people that look into free energy devices, they argue that they lose weight, and that I do believe there is a connection between over Unity devices and anti-gravity, but it has to be much, much more powerful to begin to get those types of effects. And also this means like you're not going to have like space-time distortions in your house with this device, which I think is good. I don't think anyone wants that out there. Although some
I got
people
enough of that going on already, man. I don't need any extra.
But yeah, in terms of what was the other thing about hooking it up? Oh yeah, so the crypto mining stuff. I do wonder, like, what's the implications of this type of device on crypto mining? What's this type of implications on database farms? I had the opportunity to. I don't think this is breaking anything. It's long ago enough that I don't think it matters. But I did a tour of Switch Communications, which is one of the largest commercial database farms. I think one of their clients used to be like PlayStation Network, for example, and it was just a giant warehouse filled with computers. And the biggest thing is, like, how do you power all of that? And so you can imagine if you had a giant or multiple over Unity devices, like, you can imagine what that can mean for the internet in general, because now you're not dependent upon power. You can have your power lines go out and your network's still up. It's pretty cool to think about. And then what would that do for crypto mining? You could have a bunch of computers that are all mining crypto. Is that going to crash the price of crypto? I don't think it necessarily will, but it probably will have an impact. And then
Who's saying it's gonna crash anything? No.
you always got
You better
GME,
let me
guys.
help you.
You got
Let me
GME.
help you.
I'm
I'm just saying,
yeah.
basically, it's a license to print money at that point. You want to self-fund, that's how you do it. Use them things to mine crypto, man.
I think some people who are entrepreneurial will think of ways to do that. The levels of power we're dealing with, though, are probably smaller than that. I mean, you can build this device up to actually be able to do those types of scales if you want. But the ones that we are currently working with are more of like just powering your house, which, yeah, you can power a few computers off of it, but you're not powering a whole database farm off of it. The other
No, man, I just need something that can power 8 graphics cards.
8 graphics. Oh, okay. Yeah, I forgot that you can just do it based on graphics cards. So yeah, maybe you can float off.
Man, let's look up. Let's figure this out. I feel like this is the way.
And I did talk to the entity about it, and we're not super eager on reaching out to businesses at this point, but that will become a thing. And I don't know, it doesn't mean we're not ruling them out, but it may become a thing. The other side of it too is that the other businesses I think would be interesting is the marijuana growing operations, because they use a lot of lights, I guess. That seems interesting as well, and they might be cash rich. So that could be another market. So from a business perspective, it's fun to think about these types of ideas that are out there. And that's why I think that there's definitely a market here. There's definitely an industry. And right now, I think what we're just trying to secure is like first mover advantage. And then presumably people might even find better ways to produce over Unity for cheaper. And I hope they do. If they do, I'm not going to feel bad about going out of business because somebody did it better. I think that'll be great if that happens. But yeah, and then eventually it'll leak out how their device works and get out into the public, and people will start trying to reproduce them, and hopefully they won't mess up, because then people are going to claim that it's all some big scam. So we'll see how it goes. But thanks, Cat Good. Also, I like your content. I still can't tell if Cat Good's content is like AI generated or what's going on with it. But she seems talented.
That's half the fun.
I figured that's the point, right? Yeah, it's like you're blurring the lines between reality and fiction.
Yeah, Rob, for a long time, accused me of being
be right back,
either a rogue sentient AI or a time-traveling space pirate. I shit you guys not. Hot Takes has the screenshot.
Thanks so much, Chaotic. And before we get to the next hand, I've got a couple questions from people who were not able to request up. This one came via DM from Neuschwabia. Also is making a awesome UAP based video game you guys should check out in his profile. His question for Ashton: in the video, right before the plane flashes out with the 3 drones, you can see they're spinning aligned at the halfway point of the plane. Then they all vanish. The heat signature footage shows they're leaving a cold trail behind them. Do you think the drones have onboard 0-point energy? Do you think they're just used as scanners or telemetry for a larger remote installation to warp the plane?
That's a great question. And that's what's so amazing about the orbs. I think they're all of the above. I think they're able to map the plane. I think that they have 0-point energy on board. Whether or not that's cold fusion, they're definitely extracting energy from the environment somehow. And then they're also able to produce the dark line is actually in front of the orbs when you look very closely. It only looks like it's behind them because they're moving so fast, as that the dark line then moves behind them. It actually dissipates pretty quickly if you look closely. It's very hard to tell because you can only see it in the drone video. and the camera operators keeping focused on the plane. But it's definitely in front of the orbs. And then there's also potentially a different effect where they're inducing the singularity. And the reason why I say it's potentially a different effect is that you can actually still see, let's call it the geodesic, the gravity well, in front of the orbs. Even after the plane disappears for a brief second, you can still see the line still there, which says that even until the last moment, they were creating the geodesic in front of them, potentially even while they were right before starting to converge. So there's like multiple different effects going on here at once. And that's why I think that these orbs are very advanced, and why when people first look at them, most people's thought is that's got to be alien technology. It's just, it seems magical to us. But once you start to dig into the science around it, you start to realize like, no, all these components do exist. They are in black projects. It's a matter of putting all the pieces together into whatever the orb is. And I think it's a smaller object inside that's creating a plasma field around it. And so, that's where it's wild, because I remember the first week or so I was sitting there thinking, this technology is alien technology. It's 1,000 years more advanced than we are. And then after I had dug into all the science around it, I was like, wait, we actually can have this. And then for me, it's just a question of like, how long have we been hiding this to develop it to the point where we have what I like to call them floaty orbs that are out there? Because I imagine when you look at Thomas Beard and stuff, it started with like radar dishes that would shoot up and then have their scalar beams cross and create an interference pattern, which would allow for these similar type of effects, like a directed energy weapon or a cold explosion, an endothermic event. And then after that, the next iteration would you would put those weapons on satellites, and then your satellites would be aimed downward, and you would create the same interference pattern, but from satellites aiming downward. And then the benefit there is you have a wider field of view, where you can have the cross the streams at a bit bigger distance and a bigger range. And then after that, the next best thing is, well, you turn it into some kind of mobile platform. And what's better, a mobile platform, than some floaty orbs that can just circle around an airliner or a boat or really anything you want to disappear and then just have it poof away. I truly believe this technology goes back to the Philadelphia experiment. The more I dug into the history, and you guys probably know more about UFO stuff than I do in terms of the history, but the Philadelphia experiment, Project Rainbow, stuck out like a sore thumb. I mean, you've got all the smartest scientists are linked to that. Thomas Townsend Brown, Einstein, Tesla, they're all linked to it. And there's this connection between like disappearing and cloaking something and teleportation or bending space-time, where it's like if you remove all the electromagnetic waves, like imagine we're in a sea of electromagnetic waves, we just don't see them. Imagine moving all those electromagnetic waves away from a certain area. Like what's left? I would argue what's left is the fabric of space-time, the ether of space-time. And perhaps that's exactly how you create a wormhole, is you just bend everything away from a certain point, and now you get this wormhole, or you get a gravitational effect or something like that. So I think that when we were trying to cloak the Eldritch, I think that we accidentally bent space around it, and that we didn't do it in the right way. And that's what caused it to have this weird time dilation type effect and potentially get a bunch of people sick and maybe even kill a bunch of the people on board. And then it was the 40s, 1943. So it was super easy to cover up because there was like no video of it or anything like that. All you had to do is silence a couple people, and the people that talk, no one believes them anyway. So that's my personal opinion. But that's where, like, I just think it's pretty wild to dig into the history and figure out, like, how long have we been hiding this kind of stuff, and where did it come from? I truly don't know.
I wanted to chime in here real quick. You mentioned the Philadelphia experiment and all that. And it also ties into the plane as well. I posit that the orbs were detecting matter to displace, and that it went to a parallel reality. I mean, that's my theory, and that's what I think happened with the Philadelphia experiment as well.
Yeah, and the only reason why I don't think it necessarily went to a parallel reality is because the phones were ringing. The families were adamant that they wanted the people to look into the fact that phones were ringing. And a bunch of islanders on an island in the Maldives saw the plane in the early morning hours. And then that debris that they found, I think, is from MH370. I just don't think it means the plane crashed. I think that you could have just disassembled the plane and thrown some in the water at Diego Garcia, or it could have burnt off the plane from a fire event and not caused it to crash. So those are the main reasons why I don't think that's the case, but I do wonder, and of course I can't know. I mean, people ask me like, where'd the plane go? I'm like, guys, I'm not actually psychic. So I can just tell you what we see in 2 videos and the corroborating evidence. But after that, it's like, it's just educated guesses. But I would say that there's a pretty good chance of there being some type of time dilation effect that's going on. You could even argue when you look especially at conventional quantum physics that's gone on in the last few years that you could even like potentially trap light, which opens the door to this idea of like superposition, where the plane might disappear at one point and then you can like release it later on at a different point. And then everybody goes, well, manifest, or, Lost and these other shows where the plane appears later. But if anything, in this case, I think the time dilation effect wouldn't be super long. Like I'm imagining at the most a couple hours, but again, just speculation. So last thing I want to say is that I'm happy for anyone to believe whatever they want to believe about the videos in general, so long as people just don't misstate my personal opinions on it. Because I get enough people that are like, Ashton thinks that aliens warped the plane to the Xenu dimension and stuff like that, where I'm like, no, I'm like, the evidence says that, it was our technology and that it was a wormhole, but that the plane, showed up somewhere near the Maldives and what have you. And it's important because I want people to that are normie people to take the case seriously and not misrepresent my opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. We know something happened, and this is an excellent conversation to have, and it's the only way we're going to figure out what actually did happen is by discussing it. So you're doing great work. I just wanted to chime in about the Philadelphia experiment and my own crazy theories.
Thank you. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks very much. We've got a couple more questions. I've got one more from the comments, 2 people on stage, and then we are probably going to be wrapping up. So if you do have a question and want to come up, now is the time. So Ashton, are you good for a couple more?
Yeah, let's do those last questions. Sounds good.
All right. So the next question is from Arugula. And I had it pulled up, and then there are speakers. So just a minute here. What is there to say about the research involving WSPR data that Richard Godfrey has been publicizing?
The Whisper data. The Whisper report was probably one of the first reports that I read. Because I was early on thinking this plane crashed in the South Indian Ocean, like all the narratives it said. So it actually took me a minute to realize that was all just a big lie. And the thing I used to tell people a lot, I used to talk about the Whisper report a lot in the early days. And it's funny because you can just tell right away I was skeptical about the Whisper report. The Whisper report up until the area where we think the videos happen in the Nicobar Islands is pretty legit because it mostly just uses the radar data. So we have really good corroborating data, the pings and the radar data say this plane went near the Nicobar Islands. But after that, the Whisper route gets really weird. In fact, it gets weird when it first gets into the Malacca Straits because the Whisper report basically says that the plane overlapped with UAE 343, which is another airliner, United Emirates airliner, which the United Emirates airliner would have seen it if it's going past a Boeing 777. But they talked to those pilots, and those pilots didn't see the plane. So right there, people should start to become skeptical. And then the Whisper report claims that the plane like hugged the coast of Indonesia and went around it. And it claims it did that to avoid radar. That makes no sense at all. That's not how planes work. Planes don't like hug coasts. They're not on the ground. And also that's not how you avoid radar. Radar extends way out into the ocean. So there's already some big red flags in Richard Godfrey's Whisper report. And then you have to keep in mind that using these ham radio signals is like trying to track somebody in a white shirt in like the state fair or in a crowd of people with white shirts on, and how easy it is to mistrack that person. Next thing you know, you're tracking the wrong person. They're just piecing together these ham radio signals. And the person that developed the Whisper analysis says that he's on record saying it literally cannot be used to track planes the way Richard Godfrey is trying to do that, which should be pretty much a death blow to the analysis. When the person who developed it says it doesn't work the way the person's trying to use it, seems like wishful thinking at that point. But even more, after this plane supposedly gets past Indonesia and starts flying south, then Richard Godfrey's got it doing a cutback to the west. And he even puts like weird fan fiction in there where he says in his report, and I'm probably one of the only people who's actually read all 300 pages of this report. I stayed up all night one time. And it says like he did a sharp cutback to see if anyone was behind him. I'm like, wait, how are you inferring this from some radio pings? And then right after that, all of a sudden, he just has the plane doing a 22-minute holding pattern. And obviously, the reason why he put the holding pattern in there is he couldn't find any radio pings that like fit with the plane continuing to fly somewhere. And he was basically trying to fit these radio pings in with the Inmarsat pings and the known capabilities of a Boeing 777 to make it work. And so this is already where you start to get a lot of confirmation bias at play here when you do this type of stuff. And the only reason why I was even on board at all with it is because he had the plane like targeting a bunch of different airports while it was in the South Indian Ocean or flying down through the South Indian Ocean. And I thought, oh, well, if this plane is desperately looking for somewhere to land, that would make sense. You would target a bunch of different airports. But once I found out that the videos happen in the Nicobar Islands, and that there's this weird anomaly in the Inmarsat data right at 1840 UTC where the data is just like becomes very sparse all of a sudden for the next 5 hours for like no reason. And then I found out that Whisperer can't really even be used to track planes. That's when I was all out on the Richard Godfrey stuff. I would say Richard Godfrey, bless his soul, doesn't have any credibility when it comes to trying to find the plane in terms of MH370. The other person that I would kind of poo-poo on is this guy, Larry Vance, who you'll find some reports about British analysis knows exactly what happened to the plane. And he went on with Ross Coulthart. It was him and Florence DeChangi. And you can just listen to this guy. He has no credibility. Like he's already coming out there saying, I know exactly what happened in the plane. And I know all of this because I looked at the flaperon and I was able to infer based on the tear in the flaperon, all this information that you couldn't possibly know about the pilot's mindset and all this stuff. And knowing that it was a suicidal pilot. And the biggest red flag in any community, no matter if it's investigators, UFO, or whatever, is when people claim to have unknowable information. Versus when I try to do my evidence-based research, I say, here's what the evidence is. This is the story the evidence tells, as opposed to saying, I know what happened and why the pilot did this, and this inferring based on how this flaperon was torn, that it means that all of this stuff must have happened. That's unknowable information. And when you do that, that damages your credibility. And you can tell based on how flustered the Larry Vance guy got with Ross. Ross actually asked him about the fire scenario, which I thought was funny because I told Ross to ask people about the fire scenario. And I think that's why he asked him. And he completely dodged the question. He wouldn't even answer it. It was very weird. So that's my long-winded answer in terms of the Whisper report, some of the other investigators that are out there. But good question. I'm glad people ask about that.
Thanks very much. Let's go to All Things Unexplained.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate the space. I want to preface my question by saying that we should always treat this subject with respect because this is a real life tragedy, and our thoughts and prayers are always, anytime we speak about this, with the families that were affected by this tragedy. Ashton, we were recently reviewing the Reddit whistleblower disclosure that happened a few weeks ago, and we had this epiphany when we were going over part of it. And in part of it, the whistleblower says, additionally, the algorithm accounts for the craft's place and time. I don't think this means that the craft time travels in the way we think they can, but rather goes so fast that they experience dilation and can hit objects in the future and potentially in the past at their target destination. It's possible they do this on purpose sometimes. And we were instantly like, wow, we had two thoughts. One, the space shuttle, and two, MH370. I wondered if you were aware of this statement in the Reddit whistleblower disclosure, and what do you think about it?
That's a really, really good question. And first thing on the families I want to point out too is that no families have ever reached out to me. And basically every family out there is on record saying they think there's a conspiracy at play. Sarah, who is the girlfriend of Philip Wood, the only adult American passenger, basically has said on the record she thinks the plane was abducted. Now, she's not talking about aliens. She's talking about like by another country. And so it's funny because a lot of people say, oh, well, don't you think you're hurting the families? And I go, if you've listened to what the families have actually said, then you would think the exact opposite. Like the families know there's a cover up at play here. And that should have been the most telling thing, is the people that are the most invested in it think that there's a cover up. They don't believe the story of the pilot suicide narrative. They think it's all bullshit because they're smart enough to know planes don't crash in the ocean without leaving debris fields. Now, with respect to the Reddit whistleblower thing, I did have a very credible source tell me that that was real. Now, people may say, hey, didn't you say this thing about some the Eisenhower and your source told you blah, 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 that it had been sunk and you were wrong about it? That was a different source. That was a source that first time I'd ever heard anything from them. I thought they were credible. Might be wrong. Not sure. My source on the Reddit whistleblower thing is rock solid. Never let me down on anything before. And they told me that that is very accurate. Doesn't mean that every single detail is, but that person was basically who they say they were. And I found that very interesting because I didn't really give it the time of day at first. And then I went back and read it again. And I was like, whoa. And by the way, I think that got deleted off Reddit as well. That was one of the examples I was giving earlier on. And generally, when those things get deleted off of Reddit, you want to pay extra attention to them.
We have a copy of it, by the way, if anybody's interested.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure you guys spread that around. I have it on my Twitter profile as well. Whenever I see stuff get deleted, that's when I'm posting it for sure. And yeah, there was a few aspects of it that I thought were really interesting. One of them was that some of this technology is so secret that they don't even classify it, because if just going through the classification process opens it up to too many eyeballs. And I thought that was interesting. It made a lot of sense, especially around maybe the technology we see in the MH370 videos, is that technology might be so secret that they don't even classify it. And that could explain where, like, Edward C. Lynn, the guy I think that leaked it, he might not even known what he was looking at when he leaked it. And then they have to come back and say, like, no, you damaged national security. We're going to put you in prison for that because that was our technology. When maybe he thought that aliens zapped a plane. He was like, I'm going to show the world that aliens zapped a plane. And that would be super awkward. And then they have to classify it after the fact because somebody just revealed it to the world. I think that might be actually what happened. With respect to I think it was like how they navigate the UFOs or what have you. I thought that was really interesting about the DJOC, or it starts with a D analysis, but it's basically like taking three-dimensional space and adding the time dimension to your navigational system, which seems like that would be necessary if you are obtaining superluminal speeds, because yes, there is going to be, even approaching the speed of light, you're going to have a time dilation effect, where for you might travel to Alpha Centauri and you might show up there minutes later, but from your time perspective, but for the perspective of people, when you show up, it's 4 years later because it's 4 light years away. And then you could see then why you would need something like that, because in those 4 years, for you, it's instantaneous, but for those 4 years that are passing, stuff is moved around a lot because time is just motion through space, through distance. And that's where stuff gets really weird. So there's also some other interesting stuff in there. I'm trying to think. Like, one thing was that, I think that's the one that said, if you say the name of the organization, it could get you killed. And they were afraid of saying that, and that it's like all in private contracts. This is why the UAP disclosure stuff is going to yield nothing. Like, I'm going to give you guys a spoiler. I think the news the last couple of days was they're going to pass this bill that's going to force the government to reveal everything it knows about UFOs. The government's going to come out and say they don't have anything. And they're not going to be lying, because they don't, because they put it all with the defense contractors. And that's what shields all the good stuff away from them. And that's why, unfortunately, like, I think that a lot of this stuff is a show. I have it on really good authority that people like Chuck Schumer and Marco Rubio, all the people that are in the Senate Intelligence Committee, they know about this stuff. And they know that it's like being used as an arms race and a weapons race. And these people are smart enough to not talk about it publicly and not talk about it on CNN and what have you. And that's why, unfortunately, I think that the disclosure that we get from the public perspective is all a big show, where it's not meant to be successful. It's meant to satiate the people that want there to be the next thing to come out. And a lot of the UFO community is just happy with, give me the next thing. I just want another bite, versus me. I'm like, no, I don't want any next bite. I'm just ripping the whole Band-Aid off. I'm just going to tell you all the crazy shit that we got going on that's out there. And I want to get us to Star Trek realm like tomorrow, not like 100 years from now. So there you go. We'll see how it plays out. But once again, like, I support everybody who's honestly trying to get to the truth. So I hope that stuff works out. I just don't have any hope for it.
Thanks very much. And if you have a link to that handy, go ahead and share it up in the Jumbotron. I've got the post copied and pasted into Obsidian, which I linked earlier. And that's a free tool. I'm not promoting that for any reason except I think it's super useful. Ashton, I also linked to Notepad++. If you do nothing else, at least look into Notepad++ because it adds tabs along with a lot of other things. Great tool. So also free, also open source.
I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, it's I mean, life-changing.
I'm going to link the whistleblower thing in the pill, even though I know we're not going for much longer, but I did find my post about it where it was so long I had to actually do 2 posts. I'm going to post that up there right now for you guys, though, so you can check it out if you are interested in it. It's a really good read, but a lot of these reads are really long because people are like just spilling the beans out there. Interesting stuff. Yeah.
And
Definitely.
Jonathan, we should make sure everything's in the actual pill down below so that
how do I share this?
When people re-listen to it, they have access to it, to the information.
Excellent. Yes, I've posted most of the stuff down there, but we'll try and get everything else down there as well in the comments. Let's go to, we are going to be wrapping up very shortly, probably after this last question. Let's go to Robert E. And I believe he also has some information related to the Philadelphia experiment.
I don't know how to share.
Yeah, if you're familiar with Al Bielek, have you ever heard of him?
Yeah, funny you mentioned him. I was talking to Tim Ventura. Tim Ventura talks to a lot of these engineers, and I had watched, there was like a 4-hour interview with Al Bielek. I only got through like an hour and 20 minutes. I'd already decided the guy's definitely legit, definitely knows it. Like the way he's
personal friends with him for about 2 or 3 years. Back
so what do you think?
7 years ago.
I want to hear your opinion.
We attended the same meeting house every Wednesday for about 2.5, 3 years. And I was his personal mechanic at his house. And the guy would tell stories about the Philadelphia experiment. But the one that really sticks out the most is how it all went down. And he talked about people whaling that were alive that were embedded in the ship's hull. But the one guy that came off was having a panic attack. They thought he was having a heart attack at first, checked him out. He was okay. As soon as they got him stabilized, they'd radioed out that there was a survivor, and a helicopter and guys in suits and glasses picked him up, and that was it. Wow. But Al was able to overhear that what they saw wasn't what we see here. Like they were in a different dimension. It was completely different.
Interesting.
And he mentioned doing a lot of work for the government. In the early 50s, him and a friend that he was partnered with, there was another electronics guy from the military, supposedly came up with an impulse drive, and that was when his name was changed to Al. And his wife and 2 sons disappeared at the same time, and he was relocated. Wow. But yeah, Al did come off as a really legit guy in person. Now I hear like Wi-Fi said that he was involved in the Montauk experiment. That sounded a little out of character, but of course I'm meeting the guy years later. People change over the years.
Yeah, it's interesting. It wouldn't surprise me if some of the stuff was disinformation against him to try to discredit him as well, especially if he was actually connected to the Philadelphia experiment. It's hard to say, right?
The guy he was just legitimately intelligent. I'd seen some of his notes. He was definitely advanced in physics. My stepdad that I grew up with for a few years worked at Los Alamos Laboratories, so I was familiar with seeing serious calculations, and he definitely had the skills. There was no doubt.
Yeah, and then from when I listen to him too, he's no question intelligent guy, and he feels like he's speaking off the cuff when you listen to the interview where he talks about the Philadelphia experiment, which is why I think I'm a pretty good judge character. That's why I believe that experiment really did happen. The only thing I would say is that, and this is overall with respect to the UFO community, I think there's been this focus on this interdimensional aspect, and my gut tells me, again, this is just my gut, so take it with a big grain of salt, that this is a bit of misdirection, because I think the idea of the space-time ether represents another dimension. And so you could argue that a lot of this technology, like space warping technology, wormhole stuff, is another dimensional aspect. But at least from what I've looked into it, it's not really like a place where you go hang out in the extra dimension. Now, I think it can still be consistent with what Al Bielek said about the Philadelphia experiment, because if you're inside that wormhole, if you're inside that time dilation bubble, it's going to feel like you are in an extra dimension relative to what's going on the outside. So that's where I think, though, that, and the reason why I'm skeptical about the whole extra dimension and the aliens coming from the extra dimension is that it's a really good way to tell the truth while also lying and distracting away from the stuff that's like important, because it distracts away from the technology aspect and gets into this woo area where people then say, oh, well, the aliens are coming from this extra dimension and they're watching us or whatever. Now, I could be wrong, and maybe it is. But I don't know, just it feels a little bit weird to me. So we'll see. That's all I would say. Just be cautious about those narratives that are out there. We really don't know. And if you look at the list of all the non-human intelligence answers, the list is so long that I couldn't believe how big it was. There's at least like 40 different options that are out there. So I would say let's just keep open-minded. And again, focusing on technology, in my opinion, is the way to get to disclosure that everybody wants.
Thanks so much, Robert. And I also posted a link to Alfred Bielek's website, bielek.com, bielek.com. We are wrapping up, folks, so I apologize to any requests. We're not bringing any more people up. We're not going to do any more questions. The Jonathan Caruso Show is Fridays, 8 p.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern, or a little past, and we are that little past. So, Ashton, before I close this out, do you have any parting words for us?
I just, as usual, I want to thank everybody out there. Whether or not I'm right or wrong about everything, I hope people understand that I'm not a liar. I've done my best to be as transparent, as honest as possible about the investigation, everything I've looked into, and the whole free energy stuff, although I can see why it could be very hard for people on the outside to believe at face value, and I'm not really asking anybody to do that. I want to thank MH370X, all the investigators who have dug into this, all the people that have been watching and following along, keeping this thing alive, keeping it going. And I want to thank you, Jonathan, for having me on to talk to me about this. I appreciate this conversation. I think it's been great.
Thank you so much. Miss S, any parting words?
Just to thank Ashton so much. It's been a fascinating space. And I'm hoping that trusting each other becomes more in par with reality and real life here on X, because we're able to connect just as human beings and believe each other. So thanks so much, Ashton. Sorry. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, follow everybody that's up here on the speaker panel as well, guys. A lot of really good discussion that we had, and I think this is the way that we can help get to the truth, is we have open conversations like this, where all the information just gets out there.
Thanks very much. And again, thank you for the interview. I am going to mute the stage.
I think he just muted himself. Did he just mute himself? I think he muted himself and he didn't know. Is he on a second account? Is that what's going on? Oh yeah. He didn't. He muted himself. He doesn't realize. You guys can't hear. I think he muted himself and he doesn't realize he muted himself. I'm pretty sure he's talking and he has no idea. Okay, guys. Well, while we're waiting for Jonathan to figure out, he's like probably doing a closing thing right now and nobody can hear him.
Jonathan?
There you go.
Are you there?
I think you muted yourself, Jonathan.
The ether took him. The globes. Okay. Where are you?
He did. He definitely muted
Carolyn.
himself. He definitely muted himself.
That was the best punking ever, Jonathan. He went away again. Well, we appreciate everybody coming by.
Yeah.
And I don't.
All right, hold on.
There he is.
Here I am.
Wonderful.
So here's
Welcome
what
back.
happened, folks.
This is the Jonathan Caruso Show. We got you.
So I muted everyone, and I'm talking from my This Unexplained Universe
Called it,
account,
chat.
who's not a co-host.
Called it.
So they were muted, and I'm sitting here just telling you stuff, and wow.
Called it.
Okay, so that
Right.
happened. Moving on.
Yes, let's go. So great.
Shit. So next week I'll be interviewing Richard Dell. He's an author that wrote a book, Forgotten Unity, a true story. It is in the Jumbotron, but his username is OEILL_L. I've read the book. It's great. He says it's a true story about how an ultra secretive cult in the Pentagon called the Zodiac assassinated his father. He and his father were working with Dr. I believe it was George Miley, and they came across this Zodiac group who suppressed them in the most mortal way possible. And so I am interviewing him. It's going to be a great show. That's next week. After that, I will be interviewing on Thursday, June 20th, Parsi__X, PARSI. He is an orb experiencer down in Australia, the great land down under. He sees orbs all the time, has lots of videos on his profile. And then on the 21st, from UFO Twitter, UFOX's own John Strader. And so then that will be a great interview. He just got back from Contact in the Desert, where he brought a lot of new people to spaces. And so I figured it would be a great conversation to have with him. Also on the 28th, I will be interviewing Doomer Daddy, who runs the Doom Room with Tiptastic and Fringe. And so that's what's coming up in my world. Also, there's the UFO log contest being put on by UFO Talk Radio. I am a finalist in that, along with 7 other people. The next, I think it's due. The next monologue is due on June 14th, if I'm remembering correctly. So keep an eye out for that. I'm going to be putting out a 20 to 30 minute monologue on disclosure and UAPs and NHI and all that fun stuff. So would appreciate your support. There is going to be a community vote. If you haven't already liked the space, repost it so more people see it. That helps us. We appreciate you. If you would like to support me, I do have tips open, and I do have a small business, CarusoCandles.com, where me and my lovely fiance, Ashley, create 100% soy candles here in America and sell them. Right now, only in the US, but Canada is coming soon, and later the world. So again, I'd like to thank my wonderful guest, Ashton. I'd like to thank everyone in the audience who asked very respectful questions. An excellent MH370 space. Thanks very much, folks. And Miss S, of course, you as always. Thank you. So,
thank you. Let's go.
Let's go. I can't play the stars. Hold on. Let me see if I broke this or not.
That was great. Yeah, I'm gonna probably drop out here.
When you muted, I'm
just gonna drop.
Right about to say, "Don't do it." It was a very Star Trek type of.
Oops. How come I can still hear? It's weird. I could still hear there, even though I dropped out. Okay. Well, big thanks to Jonathan and was it Miss S? Trying to remember who that was. Okay, guys, I'm going to put a link to another link here to the Discord for you guys. Thanks for being around. Thanks for checking it out. Appreciate it. Here's another link to the Discord. I just added a new science channel to the Discord, guys. So if you're interested, for the people that are part of the Discord, I'm going to put this in the message in a second, but for the science channel, please only post links. I don't want to have a lot of discussion in there. I want people to be able to see all the science links without having to sift through miles of discussion. So thank you, guys. I'm going to go get some sleep. Tomorrow, we'll probably do a science stream. Haven't really decided 100%. We have like 4 days of streaming in a row. So we've been going hard, everybody. We've been going hard. Also, tomorrow, I'm going to start sifting through some of the requests already related to EtherTech. Might start reaching out to some people. What I will say, guys, as a little kind of spoiler exciter thing, is I've had some pretty big people reach out to me regarding the devices. Not anybody huge in terms of wanting to like try to like debunk or whatever them yet. but I expect I'll be able to bait at least somebody in who's got a decent sized following. So we'll see, but it's already looking exciting. It's only been a day. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night. We'll talk soon. MH370X. I'm going to play us out with, what am I going to play us out with tonight? Let's do the Cypher. This one's probably my favorite. So thanks, everybody. Later.
In the fields where the skies are wide, talking about a journey through the cosmic ride. Einstein and Thorne, they set the stage for a trip through time across the space age. Wormholes connect distant points in space, traversable paths to a far off place. No black holes pull, no crushing weight, just a cosmic tunnel to a distant gate. Talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Bowling 777 through a wormhole flow. We're talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Bowling 777 through a wormhole flow. Exotic matter, negative energy's the key to stabilize the wormhole for you and me. Quantum vacuum squeezed so tight, creating conditions for this wondrous flight. Static fields and lasers in the lab they play, generating forces in a new kind of way. Gravitational squeezing, Casimir's force, negative zones we need to stay the course. Talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Boeing 777 through a wormhole flow. Thin shell formalism plates so fine, spherical geometry we realign. Energy conditions that we must defy. For a stable wormhole, let's give it a try. Forces balancing the plates, creating the throat, open the gates, from Earth to the stars in a single bound. A shortcut through space profound. Engineers and dreamers hold the key to future worlds and what we could be. With science in hand, we forge ahead through the cosmic paths that we now tread. We're talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Boeing 777 through a wormhole flow. From the fields to the stars, we break the chains. Understanding the universe, we make the gains. Lil Hula Crunk shines, bringing truth to light. Through his music, we'll explore the night. With wormholes and stargates, our path is clear. Explore